Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcus Bradley. I am host and founder of the XY Perspective. I want to thank everybody for joining the panel tonight. Tonight's panel is on, again, managing men's emotions, but this time with an excerpt from the Pulpit. So tonight's panel members, I have Jordan Bartlett from Abundant Faith Christian Church, Anthony Wallace Sr. from Spiritual Life Christian Church, Orlando Jordan Jr. from Resurrection Community Church, and Antoine Turrentine of Believers in Christ Tabernacle Church. These men will be sharing a bit of their lives and some of their experiences from the pulpit as men. So while we refer to them, you don't have to say pastor or reverend or anything. Just call them by their name. That's the whole purpose of tonight. So guys that aren't in the pulpit can see that men in the pulpit function just like us and are subject to the same feelings and emotions that we all are. So we want to clear up some misconceptions and misunderstandings, and also just get male membership interested back in the church. That's what this can cause too. So with that, we're going to get started. Does anybody want to volunteer to pray us in before we start? Anyone? No?
Well, I was waiting because you always pick on the old guys. So
I was going to say that next. I was going to defer to the most senior pastor in the group, Mr. Wallace, if you would, please.
Amen. Father God, we thank you for the blessings of this opportunity. We ask, Father God, that you will grace the minds and hearts of the individuals who are involved, those who are on the panel, and those who are in hearing. We pray, Father God, that they will be spurred to be a part of the conversation. We ask, Father God, that you will enlighten us, that we might be able to give some answers that are both clear and concise, and that everybody would understand that we're all in this together. We are all in this together. And we ask and plead for the Lord to be right here in the midst of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 And thank you all, gentlemen. All right, gentlemen, we did our dry runs and rehearsals. You know, the old softball questions that started out. How are you all doing?
I'm good.
Pastors, this is for you guys. How are you? How was your week?
I am blessed. And the week went, I'm tired, but I'll be all right.
Okay. Mr. Orlando.
You know, I'm doing good. I can't complain. Doing better than I deserve.
Nice. That's nice. Nice sentiment. Antoine. See there?
Yeah, I'm going to under the weather, but I'm here.
You're under the weather, but you're okay?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be all right. I tested myself. Good side, I guess.
Okay. We're gonna you gotta get a chance to clear up your audio a little bit, sir. I think you're kind of choppy over here on the on volume. Mr. Bartlett, how are you?
And I'm doing well. I'm a little unsettled. I normally like to be a little more settled in for stuff like this, but baby girl's back to school night, so she's going into the second grade. And my wife and I were just talking. We're super blessed. She's in the high ability program this year, so we had to go and get things straightened out at the school for her to be productive this school year. So I'm kind of like sneaking off camera, trying to take bites of food and stuff too. But other than that, man,
we got it. Life does wait until we got something going on, and then it tries to throw left hooks and curveballs at you. So I've had one of those days today myself, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be a good one. Gentlemen, are you guys ready for the first question?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. did you, and either one of you can answer this at any time, did you have a connection with your father, and how did that connection or lack of connection impact you emotionally? You want the youngest to go first? Who's the youngest on the panel?
I think that's me.
Mr. Bartlett?
Yeah, I'm the youngest. It's one of the Jordans. One of us is the youngest.
I think if we start looking at months, I think we gotta go down to the months. But it's,
Hey, Barack said.
I'm November. I'm pretty sure I got you.
Oh no, I'm older. I'm August. I'm older.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Mr. Jordan.
So actually, yes. I am the product of teen parents. My parents were 14 when my mom got pregnant, and they just made 15 by the time I was born. And my father actually was granted custody of me at the age of 3. So, and still to this day have a really good relationship with my father. And not only that, but we also, because I have such young parents, I was actually able to have significant relationship all the way going back to my great grandfather, who passed away when I was a freshman in high school. So my mother's father, my mother's father, and my father's father, as well as my father's grandfather, all had significant impact in my life. So in terms of emotions, I think that they all kind of brought something different. All of them came from sort of different backgrounds and experiences and things like that. And so with me pretty much spending equal time with all of them, considering that a lot of time my father was still living in his parents' house. So I was under the same roof with him and my grandfather for many years. And so they all just brought a different perspective as it pertained to emotions. My father's father, he and my grandmother have been married this year 52 years.
Nice.
So, you know, I mean, and my mother's father is not even her biological father. He adopted her. And so I've been able to experience a lot on the spectrum of fatherhood. And it's been an interesting journey, but I'm grateful for it. I think that's kind of why I'm such an old soul, people say, because I spent and continue to spend so much time with my grandparents. But my dad is, I mean, that's my guy. You know, that's my guy, still to this day.
All right, I am happy for you. That is an extremely, blessed, large blessing to have, because all that leadership and just knowledge and everything at your fingertips all the time. That's pretty amazing.
So I guess the next Jordan will jump in.
Yes, sir.
Our stories are very similar, except for maybe the beginning. So I'm closer to my dad now in adulthood than I was growing up. But I have the pleasure of 2 great grandfathers and 2 great grandmothers that are part of my life, plus my mom. And not to get too churchy, but I believe the Lord continued to send men to fill that gap, so that I would become better and not bitter. And so up until last year, or excuse me, 2 years ago, my great grandfather, which was like my best friend and the one that I got a lot of my mannerisms and morals and things of that nature from. He passed away 2 years ago. So I have the unique testimony of spending 32 years with my great grandfather. being able to glean that level of wisdom from a man that, you know, went to work and provided and protected his family and stuff. Now I'm trying to build a semblance of a relationship with my father, my biological father, and so we're working day by day. It's kind of interesting though, because I feel like I'm the parent, and it's almost like we switched. So I got to call him and make sure he's okay, and not the other way around. It's interesting though.
Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. And already this panel set itself apart. You know, this father question on the other panels was the subject of a lot of emotion, but that was because those relationships were strained. But with the first two Jordans have already set themselves apart from a lot of the panel members that we've had, where they've had their fathers in their lives and had a great experience from that. We'll probably talk to a couple of the other audience members here after the panel, but Antoine, you still there? I hope we kept him on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You want me to answer the question?
Yes, I do.
I guess my relationship with my father was somewhat different. The majority of my childhood and even my adulthood, my father was incarcerated. So I'm going to say me and my father, we had a relationship. Was it a healthy relationship like some of the others that we've heard? No. But I believe because my grandfather passed at an early age, my perspective is maybe my father didn't know how to be a father to his children because his father passed away at such an early age. He didn't get to see that aspect of fathering. When it came to providing, he was a great provider for his family, but when it came to some of the other stuff as far as emotions of things of that nature, we didn't really observe that in our home.
And do you think that had a negative impact or a positive impact for you as far as the path you chose to take?
I'm going to say it had a positive impact because observing that family unit and being a father to my kids go the same route. I didn't want my children feeling like, you know, this wasn't there, or, you know, daddy didn't tell me that he loved me and things of that nature. So I think it kind of had the reverse effect because that's not what I wanted for my children. So it compelled me to be better.
Okay. And just by a show of hands, if you got your camera going, have anybody else on the panel had an experience like that with their father, as far as the relationship strained to some degree? You can just show of hands. Okay. All right. Mr. Wallace.
Well, I love hearing the stories, you know, from the brothers, and mine is more comparative to some of the stories that you hear every day in latter times or contemporary times. My father was killed when I was 5 years old. And I told you the story about how my greatest memory of my father is my mother swimming in his blood, trying to put his body back together after he'd been torn apart by 2 shotgun blasts. My greatest wish was that I would have gotten to know him at least just a little bit. But when it comes to emotion, I was an angry young man for a long time. I was angry on up until the time I met my wife. And I met her as a sophomore in high school. And I was so dysfunctional, I'll put it that way, that she told me that if you want to be with me, things gonna have to change. And I think that was the beginning of a change in my life. But I didn't have a positive male role model, because we moved away from our people in Mississippi. We came directly to Indianapolis after my father had been murdered. And so I didn't, there were no ministers that came. There were no grief counselors that came. My mother's brothers were still in Mississippi. We ran smack dab into a prejudiced Indianapolis that they, some people, I've heard them call Indianapolis Little Alabama. It could very well be Little Mississippi, because racism was really on point. So I was angry for a long time, and I didn't know. I had a gentleman tell me once, he said, "You've been thrust into this adult world and you're not ready." And I proved him right, because the first thing I tried to do was take him out. That was my response. It was insulting, but as I grew, I found that he was, he was correct. So as far as male role models, it wasn't until I had been with my wife, 3 or 4 years before I got to really start talking to her father and her grandfather. So those are probably the two guys that influenced me the most, mainly the grandfather. And I wasn't in church. I wasn't attending church, but there was a minister named Benjamin Davis of New Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. He was a great influence on me too, but I was already in my mid to late 20s when he baptized me. So my early character wasn't the best. Not having any examples and having 7 siblings, and mom, she was like Brother Jordan. She was 17 when she started having babies, and I was second from the oldest. So when we came to Indianapolis, my older brother, 2 years older, my sister under me, we basically raised ourselves. We were in the streets doing everything we thought we were big enough to do. I managed to escape being incarcerated by the skin of my teeth, but I spent a lot of time visiting both of them in jail, either juvenile or Marion County lockup. So it was kind of a rocky first quarter of the century for me.
Yeah. If I wanted to let all the gentlemen know that, these stories, even though some of them are similar, some of them are different, the outcomes for the panel members have almost all been the same. They've now turned their lives into being ministers and helping others in church and outside of church as well. But that anger or that you may feel with your attachment or non-attachment to your father or those kinds of male relationships, you still have a choice. You can choose to use that anger. You can choose to use that in a negative or a positive way, and you can let it guide you or you can let it destroy you, but it's still your choice. So I myself didn't have my father in the beginning, and I chose a life of service through the military. And that's all I ever wanted to do, so I could protect the people around me so nobody would leave me like he did, So I chose to do that, and it worked out for me. So I challenge each one of you to think about the choices you made because of that, but still understand you can't blame dad for everything because they were still your choices. And as soon as some of us can see that, we can let go of that anger, however we need to, and move past it. I know myself, I'll be 44 and I'm just now getting to the point where I'm gliding past it, so it's hard, it's rough, but I know we can all do it.
Hey, Marcus.
Yes, sir.
I felt like you were about to transition to the next question. I just wanted to say something.
Yes, sir.
I don't want anybody to misconstrue my story. So I was an angry kid as it pertained to my dad. Okay. So much so that when people, you normally ask kids, how many kids do you want? Children don't have a sense of the number or responsibility for how many kids. And so, some kids might say, well, I want 7, I want 8. They don't understand. And I would always say 0. I don't want any kids because I felt like being a bad father was hereditary.
Yeah. And his fiance.
My dad's dad wasn't there, and then my dad wasn't there, and so I never wanted to put a kid my own through something like that because I felt like it might be hereditary. But it wasn't until And that went all the way up until I was in college. But it wasn't until I learned that my father taught me everything I needed to know, just in reverse. And he taught me everything I needed to know, just in reverse. He taught me what not to do, and that's not a shot towards him, but it helps the healing process to understand that you were taught. You just were taught in reverse. And so that was something that was extremely helpful to my life and moving on and becoming, better and being a better help to others, to understand that, I just learned what I needed to learn in reverse.
Yes, sir. And I think Antoine touched on that as well. He said he used that energy to show him how he would run his household, or the reverse of. And sometimes that's a big help to us all. What I challenge every guy here tonight, even my panel members, get off of here sometime the next week. I would like you guys to write a letter to your fathers, even if they're not here, even if they're gone. When you take some time, sit down and write a letter to him. If you're in a position to send it to him, send it to him. If not, just read it to him, or read it out loud to him. And if he's not here, I want you to take the letter when you're finished, put all your energy into it, whatever you feel in that letter, and then I want you to burn it. And then attempt to let go of everything with that letter and just let it go.
Marcus, if I could,
yes, sir.
If I could, it's funny you say that, because I did something similar. I know I talked about my dad being president, great dad, man. But much like, I guess in terms of the reverse, with him being president and him being so young, I had a window of anger once, and I was probably about 17 when that started, and maybe about 22 when it was over, because what happened was, like, I realized my dad wasn't Superman. And once that happened, like, in my mind, my 17-year-old mind, it was like, well, everything else is a lie. Oh. Right? Like, none of this is real, right? Like, when I realized my dad wasn't Superman, when I realized that, like, he was flawed, you know what I mean? Like, and so there was like that window, and so I had to do a similar thing, where I had to be real with my thoughts, and we sat down and we talked it out. Like, and it was a tough conversation to have, you know what I mean? But similar to what you were just saying with the letter, it was that idea, that type of concept, where we were able to have that conversation, and just, ultimately I realized that I was hurt because he wasn't perfect. And although he never, like, claimed to be, I mean, that was my dad. So, I mean, that's just the way I viewed it. And so even some of the things that I knew he was doing wrong, like, before that point, it didn't register to me. It was like, but if dad is doing it, it's cool, though. Right. So, like, once I started coming into the knowledge that, like, no, it's not. Like, this is not the way this is supposed to go, right? And so there was a little bit of a window where it was a little tough. There was a little strain. Like, for Mr. Wallace, this is probably surprising for him to hear, but there was probably about maybe a year and a half to 2 years where we didn't even talk. Wow. Like, wow. And for people who know me and my dad, people who know me and my dad, like, that's like what? Like, that's not a thing. You know what I mean? So we actually did that a few years ago.
Let me interject. And the reason he called me out, like, I actually got to mentor both him and his father in high school. Okay. And the struggle is real. You mentioned having choices. And one of the things I was always good at was listening. I didn't talk a bunch when I was young. So if something was being said, particularly by old heads, I was listening. I watched my brother and sisters struggle with the law and society. I watched them you know, all the different punishments, all the cops coming to pick them up all the time. You know, I watched and paid attention to everything. I also paid great deal of attention to the fact that we were poor, and I mean very poor. And we were so poor that I later made an acronym based on the word poor. We prayed often for other resources, and we did that all the time. And you learn a great deal by just listening. And the struggle, as they say, I didn't, one of the things that propelled me into being mentors for all these other young men and women is I knew exactly what it was like to be without what they were without. And then God gave me the strength, and my wife and I, we did this as a team, and we went into the school systems, and we were 30 years old, and we started volunteering. That was a quarter of a century run for 25 years. But I knew, I had been asked the question numerous times, but why do you do what you do? I said, because I'm a living example of what they're doing or not doing. I've been there, I've seen them, and it motivated me. And one of the things I wanted to be for my two kids was to be the best father that I could possibly be. I had to learn first because I didn't have a role model in that fashion. But I wanted to make sure I was there for them, and I wanted to make sure they didn't suffer like me and my siblings when we were coming up.
And I wanted to segue into our next question with that, as Mr. Bartlett explained about Superman and having flaws. Sometimes our pastors and ministers looked at in a way as being men that can't have flaws, and that they are Superman, is that they have all the time in the world for everybody. They can be everywhere at once, and they can do these great sermons and all these things and not get tired and not make a mistake. And I think there's a misconception. I want to ask the gentleman on the panel this question about those same flaws, even if they aren't true. Have anyone on the panel ever been falsely accused of something that you were ashamed about? Like, you couldn't believe that they said this one thing about you. I know I have in my military career. It's been a lot of time, but I've always guarded myself against it by not putting myself in certain situations. But you rarely, when you do hear about it from a pastor standpoint, it's always something bad. But has anyone here used something or said something that, you know, would even tear Superman's cape, so to speak?
So I'm the only single pastor on the panel. Shut up, Jordan. Don't laugh. It's not funny. And so I was accused maybe 2-3 months ago of having a baby by a woman that I've never met in a state that I've never been to. Wow. Let me give the details again. A woman that I've never met.
Okay.
That lives in a state that I've never been to.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Now, I know that the Lord can perform some miracles, but I don't think that's one of them.
Or you just got that super duper swimming around in you. Boy.
Listen, you said Superman. I guess I can fly. I'm faster than a speeding bullet.
Yeah.
Superman's DC, but as I drink from my Marvel cup.
There you go. All right. Anyone else?
Oh God.
Just one.
That's why I had to pause.
Yes, sir.
Well, you know, I don't want to be preachy, but I always think of Saul of Tarsus. And, you know, he had a lot of things that he had done before he became worked for the cause of Christ. Not to compare myself to Saul or Paul. I told you once before, Brother Marcus, and I know Orlando knows if Jordan does it, I used to fight all the time. You know, pain will make you do and say things that you probably wouldn't do otherwise. Being lost and lonely and confused. When I came from Mississippi, I was just turning 6 years old And the racism thing didn't, you know, quite hit me the way that it did once I reached Indianapolis. And when I found that people didn't care for me, I thought it was just because of me. I never, you know, put it into a black frame. I had to grow to learn that because I was fighting blacks as much as I was fighting whites. I got in a fight with this young man one day coming home from school, and we fought for a minute. You know, like guys fight. We fought until we got tired, and then we got on up and went our way. We were too tired to continue to fight. Nobody pulled the knife. Nobody pulled the gun. We just fought. 2 days later, I got picked up by the police. You know, I went to school 37, which is right next to the juvenile center. So the police came over to school 37 to take me out of class, to take me over to the juvenile center, right there on 25th. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And they accused me, this boy had been beaten almost to an inch of his life, had scars and cuts and everything all over his body. And I'm like, that's not the way I left him. But they're saying that, well, everybody saw you fighting him. They saw you do it to him. So everybody was against me. The police were against me. The judge was against me. And they were about to throw me out of school. And if it wasn't for one teacher coming in and telling the story about how all these guys were, you know, picking on me, right? Mm-hmm. Come to find out, it was a group of guys that jumped on him and they beat him up bad. And he was so afraid of them that he will allow and let everybody, he didn't say I did it, but everybody else said that I did it. So I guess that's the wrong answer, because I wasn't ashamed. I was scared more than anything else because I was being accused of doing something that I wouldn't do. Because when I looked at him, I was worried about it. So there was an accusation that it was not necessarily shame, but I was certainly fearful that of what would come of me.
I think shame can lend itself, or fear can lend itself to shame. You know, I think it's in that same kind of category as far as emotional wise. But that's crazy. That is, and I never knew you. I mean, I've known you for a long time. I've never known you fight anybody. So,
hey, I developed a gift.
Story for me.
I learned how to talk my way out of them. That's what it was.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
George. What you laughing about, Orlando?
Nothing.
Mr. Bartlett, I'm sorry. Forgot we got to George.
So for the sake of what you wanted this panel to be, I'll stay in the time frame of since I've been in ministry. And I will say this, I've been blessed that I haven't been involved in any like scandals or, you know, true or untrue. I just haven't. And Orlando knows it's hard to even get me out of the house to be involved in anything. But I think the accusations that I've had in ministry have really been more so, again, not shame, but in that same vein, more so I was hurt by them, just because, you know, anytime you handle a situation, specifically a disagreement, and someone would accuse me of being, you know, malicious or intentionally hurtful or, you know, anything like that, that's been the extent of my accusations, which on one hand is a blessing, but on the other hand, you know, is very hurtful, especially when you've essentially vowed to live a life to put other people before yourself, and then to be, you know, and the accusations like that always come from the people you've done the most for, right? Like that's generally where those things come from.
And that's why it hurts them.
Exactly. So, you know, I've had everything from, you know, people accusing me of not caring because they had a parent pass away, or, you know, I mean, just anything. Like, it's normally those types of accusations, like that I would do something malicious to someone, and that's just not even. That's like I'm not even wired that way. You know what I mean? And I'm the guy that is always conscious of like, oh, let me make sure I handle this way, or I say this way so that it doesn't come off as that, right? Like, I'm even trying to think that way. Like, that's my personality. So anytime that happens, like, it can be pretty hurtful, and that's sort of been the extent of my false accusation, and hopefully we can keep it that way. I don't want anything, popping up or anything like that. To protect from that.
That does lend itself to have me ask also that being pastors and knowing you have a following and knowing that you have the quote unquote spotlight always on you. Does that lend itself, I guess, or urge you to have that foresight of if A, then B, or if A and B, then C, and if A, B, and C, then D, and you got to have that forward plan. And I know in the military we always have to do that, but having my judgment questioned after a certain time in the Army, that didn't happen. I was in charge, I was a leader. We going this way, and everybody went. But that's the Army. I couldn't imagine having my entire life looked at in every choice I made, who I dated, who I married, where you went, and because your following is going to judge you. I couldn't imagine having the microscope over me like that about every single decision. So that makes all of your jobs more commendable myself. And I wanted to, I seen a hand raised from Justin Jones. I think you want to say something before we go to Antoine, but let me, Justin, you had a comment about this last question? You still there?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I didn't really have a comment. I was just saying that my story is kind of similar to Wallace's a little bit.
Okay, well,
as far as what he was talking about, but
you got the microphone here for a few minutes. Let us hear it.
Okay, just from the beginning, with my father and everything, I'm a product of a prom party. So my mom and my dad actually never were even a couple. They kind of like hooked up at the end of a prom, and I was born, and when I was born, my mom was actually about to get married to a whole nother man. So after I actually was born, I took on the other man's last name and not my dad's last name.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't actually really meet my dad until I was 15. And this other guy that my mom married, he was into music a whole lot. He raised me a little bit. They got a divorce when I was 7, but he was there, but he wasn't there. So and then he had a whole lot of other kids even before him and my mom had got married. So he wasn't even taking care of his own kids. So I already knew that he wasn't, worried about me. And so from 7 to grown, after they got a divorce, my mom, she worked a lot trying to take care of me and my 2 sisters. And I was pretty much grown. Like, I pretty much did what I wanted to do. And, I watched out for my sisters, but, I did my own thing. And then, when I was 15, it's like, well, this guy is your dad. And it's like, okay, well, what does he expect from me? Like, I'm grown now. You know what I mean? Like, I've been grown. I'm not, but I've gotten into a whole lot of trouble and done a whole lot of things, just I'm used to being overlooked. And I don't know, I kind of had that kind of attitude through life, where I'm used to being overlooked. And yeah, when I finally met my dad, it was more of me being the bigger person than him. And You know, he act like he didn't really, you know, like he was running from the law most of his life from child support, but he never actually paid us anything or paid any of his other kids anything. Or and I still have a relationship with him now, and I've forgiven him for everything, but it's just
I'm glad you touched on that. We're gonna I'm a pin that one because there's another question for the panel, and I think they'll have some other things. But I'm gonna stop you right there because I know where you're going with it, but I want to save it for the additional part of the panel. That's a good point that you brought up right there. So I'm gonna hold that for you real quick, and then we'll come back to it. Antoine, I'm sorry about that. I ain't meant to cut you off, but I wanna try to keep the flow going. Antoine, what's one example that you had happen to you or that you were accused of?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so one situation that I can recall, and I'm gonna be transparent with everyone, but I was in ministry. I was a young guy, newly married, and we had a young girl that was a friend of my sister's that was living with us because her mother had put her out and she was going to high school. And after living with us for some time, I can't remember exactly the situation, but she got mad at me for something and accused me of trying to have sexual relations with her. Before I had found out about it, there was other family members that had contacted me and said, well, she's going around telling people that, you know, you was trying to do this to her and do that to her. And I'm like, what? And while she's telling people this, all along, she's still living in my house.
Oh, no.
So when I found out, I mean, I'm a servant at heart. I'm always trying to help people, and especially when I can relate to an individual and what they're going through, then that it pushes me more to try to help them. But my wife has always told me, she was like, no, I wouldn't recommend you doing that. You know, but I felt like that it was always the situation. You know, like her mom would throw her out at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and throw bleach all on her and bleach all on her clothes. And she got to go to school tomorrow. And she would call me, and I'm like, I can't just, you know, I'm telling my wife, I'm like, I can't just leave her out there like that, you know. But nonetheless, she said these things, and I was hurt and ashamed because of what she was saying. But I'm glad that God gave me the wife that He gave me, because through the situation, she supported me the entire time. And not one time did she say, you know, no, you probably did it, or, you know, the whole time she supported me. So
you're a better one than me. I'm look, no ma'am. Exit stage left all the way.
Yeah, but I mean, that day that it hit the fan, she did leave, but there was another situation where she did come back. But you know,
I got a 1 strike rule on that one. I'll help you. Once you got that 1 strike, holla at you. You got to, you know, move out. Going out. But that's why he put you in the position that you in, because look here, ma'am, Miss Ma'am. You got to go. I'm sorry. I'm glad we got those kinds of stories, because the next question for the panel, it kind of ties to that. It deals with temptation. And I know, again, being the spotlight, there's another type of light that I guess you guys are thrown into, I guess, just because of the nature of your position, being in charge or being in power, we sometimes know that ladies and other things like people in power. So my question to you panel members is, how do you handle the attacks on your flesh? How do you deal with temptation? And does it happen often? And do you have a situation in mind that you can speak to that? And I'm gonna let some of the audience members answer after that too, but I want to get the panel first. I want to see what the panel has to say with that. Yes, sir. I need some Jeopardy music.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Probably not as much now. You know, with all this gray hair and things like that, I don't have much problems, but many problems with that. But growing up and then early in ministry, yes. When I was doing the fatherhood program, yes. There was a time when I had about 150 men that was in my group, and most of the people, when the ladies would come, because I was in charge, they would come to me making overtures to get in some of my meetings, wanting to get with the fathers. Then there was a few that would, you know, come directly at me. I would remind them on occasion that, you know, it's you know, really not me that you want. You just like what I'm doing. I'm fathering all these babies that aren't mine, and you appreciate what I'm doing. So I would ask them, you know, point blank, if I give you what you want, would you respect me the same way? You know, and one young lady said, "No, but can we do it anyway?" And there was a young lady. I was an associate minister, and she had stopped me in the back hallway at the church and asked and said she needed to talk to somebody. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, let's talk. We stepped into the fellowship hall, and I turned my back on her one time, and she had unbuttoned her top, and she was braless. I turned around. You know what that does to a man. I'm like, oh my God. And so, stronger than I was when I was younger, I turned around and I said, when I turn back around, I want you to be fully dressed. And so I turned back around and she was, and I said, okay, what can I do for you? She said, never mind. You know, but yeah, lust, let me say this to all the fellas, and they all know this, but I'm gonna speak being the old senior citizen on the panel. You know, let's be realistic, brothers. Lust is something that's going to be with you for the entirety of your life. There'll come times when things will come to you in that fashion, particularly when, and not just because you're young, Brother Jordan, you're married to a wonderful woman and you're going to be that way. But there's always going to be those outside influences. You know, I was telling Marcus and I, we were talking the other day, and I said, you know, today we're inundated by splits and tits. You know, our clothes are so tight and our breasts are always hanging out. And we're all just men. It's innate. You are made to like women. There was an old minister, his name was, well, forget whatever his name was, but he says, you know, the difference between men and women is, you know, back in the day, the women were taught to say no, and the men were never taught to say no. Feel me? And so, so we were in hot pursuit most of the time. One of the curses, and some curses do turn into blessings. And I was blessed to have a gift of gab. And then I was also blessed not to be too ugly either. Okay. And so there was never a problem with the ladies. I think the best thing God did for me was send me my wife early in life, because she wasn't taking no crap. But the opportunities were always there. And I had a brother tell me once, he said, you know, I like hanging out with you because you attract women. And I'm like, seriously? He said, yeah, man. He said, you attract women. You don't even know it. He said, you attract women and I swoop. I was like, okay. You know, like that. Well, you know when somebody's looking at you a certain way. But I don't know, I always had a healthy fear of a fast woman. You know, I never looked at myself to be unique enough that all these ladies are going to be chasing after me. You know what I'm saying? So if a woman was too aggressive, it kind of, I'm going to tell you the truth, it scared me, because I'm like, well, what, you know, I don't want to be just another brother in line. I never wanted to have that happen. But the reality is, for us as male animals, Lust is a battle that we will always have to fight. I used to tell the kids, and I don't know if I ever told you, Brother Jordan, but men, we have to learn to say no, even though we were never taught to say no. But just like our sisters were taught to say no, we have to learn to say no. And the quicker something comes upon you, the easier it is to come up on you, the less likely it is you want it or need it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's just hope you don't have to visit the dating game anytime soon, because it is insane.
Hey, I'm getting ready to celebrate 50 years in 1 year. And God sent me the best friend that a man could ever possibly have. It might have taken me a few years to really catch on to that. I'll say 46 years ago. But now that we celebrating 49 in January and 50 in next year, I'm one of the luckiest men in the world.
Yes, sir. Congratulations on that as well.
Yeah, the dating pool has pee in it. I'm convinced of it. Yeah, God bless y'all. God bless y'all in Jesus' name. So oddly enough, so people that are watching and listening, I think that I have been in ministry the longest.
Okay.
Out of the panel members. So I started preaching when I was 10. And so the interesting thing is, I would go and I travel to do revivals a lot early on in ministry, and you would be surprised how many times you go to another state, another city, to do a 2-3 night revival, and how many knocks at your hotel room door you get from women that were in the service. And so it's an interesting place to be, because to be young and to have those temptations like right there, you didn't have to, you didn't go out, you didn't go looking for it. You were sitting in your room resting from preaching, and you get a knock at the door, and it's a woman with a jacket on with no clothes on underneath. And so early on in life, it's kind of funny. Early on in life, temptations were really easy to bypass. But now in my 30s, I have a group of men. My best friend Avery is on tonight, and we've been best friends over 20 years. And then Elliot Stubblefield, between these two, I bounce a whole lot of stuff off of those two men when things pop up and come my way, because I know that between the two of them, somebody gonna pull up on my house if it's too crazy, and make sure that the temptation doesn't get me. And so it's an interesting place to be, especially in ministry, because I think people just assume that lust or sexual desires or anything like that just bounces off of you, like you're not, like you stop being a man because you're in ministry, and that could not be further from the truth. You like my Pastor Wallace is my cousin in real life. And so just like he said, you come to church and you think you might be safe, and then somebody pull you in the fellowship hall and flash you at the church. And so it's just being real and being transparent enough. I think that we've done both people that are in church and outside of church, I think we've done them a disservice by for many years pretending as if sin didn't exist in the lives of preachers. It does, and stuff does come up, and sometimes we make it through it, and sometimes we don't make it through it. And, you know, you got to clean yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going forward. And so I think that that's the real honest conversation that we need to, that we should be having with people, that it is real, that it does happen. And, you know, I just hope that my testimony is going to always be that I surpass it more than I succumb to it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Bartlett.
Come on, bro.
So let me give a little bit of disclaimer for us. First and foremost, when we answer the call to ministry, none of us on this panel are a part of the Catholic Church. We did not take a vow of celibacy. Mm-hmm. That's not what we signed up for. And yeah. But also when we talk about, because the question was how do we deal with the temptations, right? Mm-hmm. And although lust and things like that are probably maybe the hardest to deal with and the most prevalent, they're not the only ones, right? So, and the reason why I give that is because I don't want it to come off, what I'm about to say in terms of how I deal with mine, I don't want it to come off as if I don't have issues. But everybody, whether you're in ministry or not, everybody doesn't have the same issues.
Yeah.
And so I teach in my church, like, temptation is only temptation when it's something you desire. So for example, about a month or so ago, I decided in terms of my diet to go paleo. Now, for some people, that's not a problem because they don't really eat Little Debbie's and Hostess anyway. But for me, that's a temptation because I like Little Debbie and Hostess, right? Like, so it's only temptation if it's something you want. The reason why I say that is because, you know, whether you're in ministry or not, everybody has their own, you know, temptation. And so as it pertains to probably what's most prevalent, which is like lust and things like that, how I deal with it is, number one, I got married really young. I got married at 22. And no shade to anybody else, but I think I married the finest woman on the planet. And so there's not really much competition out there for me. And so, but also I don't assume that is enough to keep me right. So because of that, my wife is generally present with me everywhere I am. Mm-hmm. If I'm somewhere where there's, you know, likely other, you know, women and things like that, she's with me. If I'm in one-on-one settings with women, I never meet with women one-on-one, never with the door closed, you know, and a lot of times I won't even do it with another man. Like most of the time I'll have another woman present. And so, but I have been blessed because from a ministry perspective, all the churches that I've ministered in and been a part of have been fairly small and been family churches. So, you know, I didn't really have to deal with that inside of the church. Outside of the church, I think I've been okay. Much like Mr. Wallace said, you know, I've never really had an issue with getting the attention I wanted from women. So there's a lot of times where women are given attention that I don't even recognize it's happening, right? Because like that's never been a thing for me. For a lot of guys, if they didn't get that attention, you know, early on, they're a little more sensitive to that. But like even coming up this week, I leave Sunday after church. My job is sending me to Houston for a conference. My job is paying for my plane ticket. The conference pays for, you know, covers the hotel. So once my job sent me my flight information, I bought a plane ticket for my wife on the same flight. And she'll be in the hotel with me. So when I get out of the conference, I'll be going to the hotel where she is. You know what I mean? Like, so I try to really be, and don't get me wrong, like that's not why she's coming. She's coming because we kind of were able to get us a little cheap, little vacay real quick. But still, you know, but even still, you know, even if that wasn't the case, there are things and events and things that I've politely declined. And the people that I've declined to, they didn't know it, but in large part it was because, like, yo, if my wife isn't available to go, I'm not going. Just because I don't even want to put myself in that position. So, you know, not to get too churchy or anything like that, but like one of the things that I tell people all the time in dealing with temptation, the Bible doesn't really talk about how to beat it. The Bible tells you to run from it. So it says flee from temptation. So, you know, I try to do just that. You know what I mean? I don't want to have to test my willpower. I don't want to have to do that. If I can help it, I don't want to have to test my willpower. I'd rather just do whatever I can to try to avoid those situations. Now, again, when we talk about the spectrum of temptation, every Friday night I'm tempted to be drunk somewhere because of all the stuff that done took place, you know, from the week. So that's more of a temptation for me than, you know, some nappy-head woman. I don't know, like whatever. Like I'm tempted to disappear sometime. Like, where anybody heard from Jordan? I'm just, you know, those are the type of temptations that I deal with. You know, because from what I understand, well, Marty, this panel is about being transparent. So if we being real about the situation, that's
as a service member and a senior leader as well, I was never alone with a younger female soldier. I was never alone, like in meetings or anything, never with a door closed, never by myself. And like you said, even with the other guys, because nowadays the Army, I don't even think y'all would recognize the military the way some of these guys act. I don't want to be alone with you, Cat. No, go ask somebody else. You know, I'm gonna give you Chaplain Turrentine's number. You can call him. But since I brought him,
somebody dust the tire marks off his back, man. Somebody dust some tire marks off Turrentine's back, man.
Chaplain Turrentine, I'm sorry for throwing you under the bus like that, but give me your battle, your how you deal with temptations, Antoine. I'm sorry about that, brother. I didn't mean to do that to you.
I'm gonna let that one slide.
But for y'all don't know, me and Lieutenant Turrentine, we go way back in the military. So he was a younger NCO when I was becoming a senior, and then he transferred to officer and became a chaplain. So I'm really proud of him for doing that transition, because that's what he always wanted to do. I always used to call him Baby Jesus, because he never did anything. He never got in any trouble, never talked a lot, just except when we were alone. But he was the only guy I would like rap to like that. So I called him Baby Jesus in the Army. So I'm interested to see how he deals with temptation, if it ever comes to him.
Yeah, come on, Baby Jesus.
Saint Turn.
Well, that's one way you deal with it. But my previous pastor used to always tell me, a good run is better than a bad stand.
Mm-hmm.
A good run is better than a bad stand, because when I was in school as a minister, coming from Brightwood, I had a lot of people that still tried to try me. And so she said a good run is better than a bad stand. But I mean, there's so many scriptures that we could reflect on, like, you know, scriptures say resist the devil and he shall flee. You know, surrounding yourselves around other like-minded people to keep you from falling into temptation. I mean, it's more so who you hang around. And if I know that some people that I may be hanging around may be up to no good, then you know, I may bring somebody with me that I can draw strength from if things go in a direction that they should not go. I mean, so that's one reason why, one reason how I deal with temptation. I mean, even like Marcus said, you know, and just stand out the way. Stand out the way. And not always trying to be in the forefront and be seen and be in the mix. You know, go find some time in the Bible.
But even with that, and being pastors and ministers at y'all church, y'all are looked at to be that guy, that go-to guy. So even trying to find time alone sometimes is a difficult challenge. Would you agree with that, or?
I'll say that. So coming up, so August is always my sabbatical month. I always take the month of August off for the last 2-3 years because I grew up with, and it's not a shot towards him, it's just the fact of life. I grew up with a pastor that never went on vacation, that never took a break. His definition of going on vacation was going to the church convention where he had 15 or 16 meetings that he had to be in anyway, put his feet in the sand one time for 5 minutes, and that was vacation. And so, you know, I always said that if ever I was in that spot, I'd make sure that I took time away. And that's even Jesus took a break from his disciples and went and prayed by himself. And so, you know, using that example, sometimes you have to steal away, and I'm grateful. I got a pastor cousin, I got a close brother, close friend that pastors as well, and probably a good. And then I got Bartlett, he's preaching for me in August as well. I've got good people, good men around me that I can trust when I'm gone, to be able to, you know, pop in and preach to the people. And I believe that every pastor, it might not be a whole month, but every pastor should take some time and vacation and recharge. So much so that even the Lilly Foundation finds importance in it, where they have a pastoral renewal program where, you know, you fill out the paperwork and they give you between $50,000 and $75,000 to be away from your church for 3 months. So even hold on, one minute. Hold on. I got you later.
Yeah, I need to
I'll call you.
Send me a link.
I got you.
We need to have a secondary Zoom or something.
Does that work for military? Yeah.
But you got to take a break. You can't do this all. Jesus took a nap while a storm was brewing on the water, while they're in a boat. Jesus was asleep.
I don't think he was worried about drowning though.
No, because he could walk. He was moonwalking on the water. You know, just
right.
I mean,
sir.
But you got to take a break.
Yes, sir. But that leads right into the next one. And pastors, I want y'all to take a half step back on this next question, because I'm gonna let just the audience members comment first, and then I want y'all to give y'all take on the question. I don't know if anybody knows it, but the suicide rate among pastors have gone up 30% since 1999. And in recent years, it's reached a 50-year high. I didn't know it. It kind of blew my mind. Have you had suicidal ideations, and what did you do to overcome it? When we just talked about taking breaks and things of that nature. So when times get rough, when times get hard, when times get, low, when you get low, I guess, emotionally. And I want to ask the audience first, so if they want to comment, they can. And then I'll get the pastor's takes on it. What did you do when you had suicidal thoughts, and how did you overcome And I want to start with, let me see, the first ones on the docket were Elliot Stubblefield and Justin Jones. So I'm gonna let them two go first. Elliot, if you would, sir.
Well, to answer your question, yes. There's been particular times in my life where things have been just to the point of just being overwhelming, where I didn't feel like that. I remember that there was one particular time I had lost my job. I got a job, was doing well, running my own department, and probably 3 months after writing a total overhaul of their HR policy, they decided they didn't want a corporate training program anymore, and they was going to outsource my job. And this was after 2 years of unemployment before. And I remember sitting in the driveway of my house, thinking, like, what do I tell my wife and kids now? We've just suffered this. It seemed like this was going to be the blessing. This was going to be the new start that I needed. And just even being fearful of what my wife would think, oh God, here you go again, and the blessing is that I have people that care more about me than they do about my situation. And you don't know how much people care about you until you are seriously struggling, till you are at your lowest, and how they react to you when you're at your lowest, will define your relationship a lot of times for life. Mm-hmm. And I had people who spoke into me. I had my brother who was at that time living in Germany, refused to get off the phone with me. My other brother who lived here came over and talked to me. And it wasn't so that they could expose me, because I was already a preacher. I had already done stuff. I was a senior leader in my fraternity. On the surface level, I had it all together. But I had people that I could be vulnerable with, and that's what saved my life. I also found out who wasn't there for me. So the person I reached out to first literally told me they didn't have time to talk to me. And they didn't know at that time I was sitting there with a 40 caliber Smith & Wesson with a bullet in the chamber ready to stick it in my mouth. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times you have to be, and what these things, I always ask God, like, let me learn from my past so that I can teach somebody. What I realize is that everybody doesn't have your back, but some people really do. So you have to get to the point where you understand the dynamics of your friendship, and that'll help you with temptation and when rough times get started. But I believe that it was really God's grace that those people who are now both members of my church, they've seen me at my worst, and they still hear me preach every Sunday. You know what I'm saying? So those are the people that you really need. Like, Pastor Jordan said, he knows I'm coming if he don't answer the phone after I call him a couple of times. I might show up at his job or at his house, or, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, I care more about, his calling. I care more about, him as a person than I do about what he has or what he doesn't have. And you need people in your life. And sometimes in life, you won't have many of them. That's why I tell people all the time, I don't need any new friends. I just need to be better to the old ones. So I think that's yeah. I mean, that's guaranteed something I dealt with at a time.
Mr. Justin.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's why I wanted to bring you back in at this point. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on the question as well.
So I've definitely had thoughts like that in the past, but me, I don't know, something just in my spirit won't let me dwell on that kind of thinking. But what I ended up doing was going into a mode where I would hide myself from a whole lot of stuff, and I would only do things that made me feel good. Like I would medicate myself with video games. Back, especially when I was a teenager, it was, masturbation was a big thing for me. Girls, of course, was a big thing for me. was just like I would do so much things that made me feel good that I wouldn't really dwell on suicidal thoughts.
Okay. So it was an attempt to cover as well, correct?
Exactly. But during my life, you know, now I'm 40, I'm almost 42. I realized that doing things like that, and you know, hide myself and doing the feel good things, it really don't help, because at the end of the day, you're still going to be faced with your problems. You're still going to be faced with these issues that have always been there. So it helps time go by, but it doesn't solve the problem. The only thing that's going to solve that is Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask the pastors as well. I'm sure you've heard similar situations in your counselings as well, but this panel being about you guys, I want to know what you guys, when you do have your low points, who do you go to other than God? Who do you go to get back on the right track? And is there a big circle around you? Is it circle small? Is it, you know, one or two people? Is a whole lot? Like, how do you deal? How do you go forward to get back on track when times get low for you guys?
I guess I'll hop in first. I'm a therapist outside of being a pastor. I'm a therapist in my secular job, and so I'm a therapist with a therapist.
Yes, sir.
And just being quite frank, I don't trust any therapist that don't have a therapist. Mm-hmm. Just to be perfectly honest. And so, you know, life gets hard, and especially ministry, there's a loneliness that comes in ministry, that even with a wife or a circle of friends or a you know, a support system, there's a loneliness that comes in ministry, that a lot of people won't understand, not being within it. And so I tend to talk to my people, my sphere of friends, of pastors, of people that know me, that love me, that'll pull up on me if I don't answer my phone after they call twice while I've been on the Zoom call and can't click over. And their son is supposed to be playing at a basketball game, but they pull their son to come knock on my door to make sure I'm still alive. But it's fine. I'm not complaining at all. And so, but you know, I have to lean on. I have to lean on my support system, and I definitely talk to my therapist, because I definitely believe in the power of prayer. Let me make that perfectly clear. But I don't see anything wrong with Jesus and a therapist.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Antoine.
So I can't really comment on this question, because I've never really been in a situation where I've had suicidal thoughts. I mean, there has been time where things have gotten hard, and I have felt like giving up, not taking my life, but giving up and just walking away from the church and or ministry, you know, depending on the situation. But as far as that, I can't really comment on it. But I mean, I do have a support team.
Okay, I was just about to ask that.
Family members that I can call on, that call and check up on me. And you know, one of my cousins that's on here, you know, we periodically check up on each other. We're battle buddies, so that's what we do.
So that's why I call him Baby Jesus, everybody. You know, look, he never had a bad thought. I'm kidding. But he is very, very serious about how how he goes about things, and I'm impressed because even myself, I'm gonna tell you, I've been through the ringer, and it was all stuff that I did to myself. So I can't point the finger at nobody. It's all me. And I tell you, my circle is about as small as a period. So I got very, very few people I can go to, very, very few people I can talk to. Everybody in my family always tells me I need to have more friends, but I go to work, so I don't know. But I too have reached low points, and it's gotten bad. So, but Mr. Wallace,
can I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I mean, so even with saying that, it's I guess it's kind of hard or a struggle to open up to people, because you open up to someone about how you're feeling, and you become vulnerable, and you may at some point that may be thrown in your face, either to you make that person mad, or whatever the case may be, and they're trying to intentionally hurt you. So I mean, for leaders, I mean, even speaking for myself, when I experience certain lows, I tend to somewhat, I'm not going to say shut down, but kind of pull away, because of the fear that I don't want to open up to someone or be vulnerable, and then that be used against me in the future. Okay. So, I mean, there's a mother in our church that sings a song that says, Lord, don't let me fail. I want to be your bride. When my faith grows weak, always let me see something in my life that you have done for me. I mean, so that's just one thing that I use personally, okay, as a way to encourage myself or pick me up, to think on the good things that God has done for me, and those always outweigh the bad.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's good. Mr. Wallace, sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. I used to say, beloveds, that God gave me an otherworldly love. And I say that not to separate myself, but I've always been more concerned about others than I was about myself. I've never considered suicide. I remember when Martin Luther King died, I cried like a baby, and I was a very young man. I heard someone say once, how can someone care so much for so many when so many could care less about someone? The thing that gives me pause is the reality that we're not together as a people. Mm-hmm. And men are suffering through this fallacy that we can't be sensitive, which in and of itself is evidence that we are sensitive. One of the things, I consider myself somewhat a little philosopher sometimes. I'm not Tupac. I don't need all eyes on me, but hear this. The more demonstrative a man is in regard to his masculinity, the more fragile is the masculinity in regard to the man. Every time we try to prove our strength, all we're doing is confirming our weakness. What we have to do as men is stop listening and falling for that old fallacy that we can't be sensitive. One of the most prominent phrases I've heard from young men, particularly young men doing counseling, is that, well, Pastor, there hasn't been a psychological release. And the problem is that I shouldn't say problem, but the reality is that we're all suffering from the same contagion. And each of us, for some reason, particularly men, want to isolate themselves as if this is only affecting them. And then we've even gone so far as men to even separate and put our women in a different cocoon, as if they haven't gone through oppression. This American ass whooping has broken a lot of us, forgive my French, but it's affected us in so many ways. And if I was to pose it as a question, and here's one of the problems that we have, we're all at a hyper level of sensitivity. Mm-hmm. But we can't discuss sensitivity with our fellow man because our fellow men are sensitive. So how do you tell a sensitive man about his sensitivity? It's a very, very difficult thing. And we spend most of our time trying to deny that reality rather than sitting down and conversing with one another, because most of the contagion that has us bound is common. All the things that we've gone through. I told you about the story of my father and all these young men and women out here who have had trauma in their lives, and each of them think that their story is unique. Now, I can understand that from someone probably less than 20, because their stories are immediate to them. But anybody older, I would always tell them is, you say there hasn't been a psychological release, and here's what I found. And through all of my adult life, I've been mentoring the young people and older people that would listen. And I found that to be therapeutic in itself. I've gone through so much that I thought, if I'm sharing what I've gone through with some young person, be she male or he female, male or female, then that would eliminate them going through it, or maybe not eliminate them going through it, but they'd be forewarned. We tell them all the time, and kids have the habit of saying, and I don't mean to wax on, but one of the favorite phrases that kids use when they're growing up is this: it's not fair. And the reality is we have to tell them, you're right, it's not fair. So we know that we got our job cut out for us. But for any of us who are of age, and we sat and we've gone through trauma, we've gone through oppression, we've gone through discrimination, we've gone through pain, all these things for all these years, but yet we won't go and share that with someone younger. I found that to be very therapeutic. Now, who do I go to? Well, my wife is a nurse. We talk quite often. My daughter's a sociologist. I'm a psychologist, and we both have master's degrees in that area. We don't have licenses, so we don't practice. But as ministers with a great deal of life experience, we have at least enough wherewithal to be able to refer them to somebody like the Reverend Jordan that is a psychologist, okay? So my greatest lament, and I pride over this, my greatest lament is the reality that we've gone through all of this pain, and we still here in 2022 can't sit down and have conversations at large like we are having right now. That gives me pause, that gives me pain. But I've never thought about killing myself, even though I thought about how lonely this walk is. The brother mentioned about having friends. I can probably count them because 2 of them are in the room, 3 of them in the room. Anyway, but we got a lot of work to do, but we have to do it in communion. I'm done. I can't hear you, brother.
I'm sorry, my mic had muted. I apologize. Mr. Bartlett, did you want to add to that? And thank you for that statement, sir. I'm sorry. For some reason, I have muted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll just add something really quickly. I have not had suicidal thoughts, but I have had thoughts that would be very detrimental, right? Like they would ruin my life, right? Like I never thought about taking my life. I thought about doing some stuff that would that would ruin my life. Okay. And so I've been, again, blessed, man, and fortunate enough that I am not master level psychologist nor a licensed therapist. However, I am a certified life coach outside of pastoring, and I work for Eskenazi in the trauma department. So mental and emotional wellness and health is a big part of dealing in the trauma department. It's not just physical or penetrating trauma, but also the mental and emotional aspect of that as well.
Very real.
And just to kind of prove the point of, when I say I'm very blessed, for whatever reason, God has saw fit to put people in my life that are in those areas. So I'll be transparent. I know I've not yet, let me put it that way, I've not yet gone to Orlando or to Mr. Wallace and had to pour out everything to them. However, I know that I can. I feel safe doing it, right? So it's not that it hasn't been done because I don't think I can. I know for a fact that I can. As a matter of fact, I've had conversations with Mr. Wallace where my experiences with him is, and I don't know if he knows he does this, but he always looks at the positive side of everything. Right. So there's sometimes when I know, and I have to kind of like self-diagnose, and I'm like, I just need to hear something positive. So like, I'll put a question on Facebook that I know the answer to, and then 7 minutes my phone is ringing. Right? Like he's like, nah, he's like, I feel like I know where you're going with this, but let's talk about it. Right? Like this has happened multiple times. The same thing for Orlando, and even my closest mentor right now, who's also a pastor, but he and his wife are both counselors and therapists, right? So like, God has blessed me to be able to put people like that around me. And then, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, but I stand by this. Now, I don't consider myself to be a philosopher. However, I live by this. A smart man learns from his mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. Yes. And so with me having seen how my grandfathers did and didn't deal with or even address or acknowledge, mental and emotional wellness, anything like that. I wanted to learn from that. And even my dad, who's very close to me in age, never really addressed his mental and emotional wellness. I wanted to learn from that. And again, I think for me and Orlando, we're kind of blessed because like those are popular words in our generation now. Like I don't think y'all had that. Like that wasn't a thing. But yeah, what do you mean? Well, you better say a prayer and keep on moving. Like what are you talking about, right? And so we also have been fortunate just to be in the generation we're in, where these things are, for Orlando to say I got a therapist. Like there was probably maybe 20 to 25 years ago, if a pastor would have said he had a therapist, the church would be empty on Sunday.
Empty.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like,
sure. And our phrase for us was "suck it up." That was our phrase. Suck it up.
Yeah.
Whatever that was. I want to give. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm pretty much done. I'm just saying I've been fortunate, and even though I've never had suicidal thoughts, I've had detrimental thoughts, and I have people around me that can help with that, and will and have, and I know will in the future.
And
that's what I wanted to ask. That's why I wanted to ask the audience as well. I think we got Anthony and Gun Show K, and who's this DJ Avo. I wanted to ask you, brothers, how many people do you have in your immediate circle that you can go to? You can just give me a number or just briefly explain it. Do you have anybody you can go to and talk to, and how many people listen? Who's this? DJ, Gun Show, and Anthony Boxley. If y'all want to just chime in real quick, I just want to know if you have anybody in the circle. You don't have to.
I'll jump in here real quick. I got about 5 or 6 people. Actually, me and my therapist actually sat me down and we talked about all the people we got around. And I got about that many people.
Okay. Gun Show or Anthony Boxley. I seen you unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. I'm quite different. I have quite a bit. Not that, and I only say that only because, there's not much that I really see myself going through to where, I have to share so much to where I feel like, I have to be secretive about my life. I'm a pretty open person, so people know majority of what I'm dealing with. I have a big family, which is where that comes from, because, I'm just so open with everybody. I'm so cool. And when it comes to me, like being a realist, like I just don't feel like there's too much that I'm sharing if I'm talking about anything, based on like, besides my like social security number or something like that, but if I'm going through something, I feel like anybody can be an outlet. I mean, and I don't see anybody using it against me to where it can affect or harm me in a way to where, you know, I beat myself up about sharing whatever I talk to them about.
Okay.
But close people, I will say like a good 6, 7, if not more than that.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That's a lot of people to have like in your inner circle. For me, like I said, I know about a good 2 people, and one of them's my younger brother. You know, and sometimes I don't even like tell him nothing because he's a knucklehead sometimes too. I ain't gonna learn nothing from him sometimes, so I don't even say nothing to him, and that's bad. But you know, you can have 40-year-old dummies, and my brother's one of them. You know, I try to get him right, but I cannot imagine having 6 or 7 people I can trust with like pertinent information about myself. I couldn't imagine it. So that's great. That's great. Wow, that's a lot for me here. Mr. Gun Show.
His family. I'm sorry.
Say again?
I said majority is family. I grew up with a big family. Antoine, that's Lieutenant Turntime. That's one of my members, and you know, he know like I'm just so close to everybody. I can be close to so many, but nobody. If they are going behind my back, they're doing a good job. I ain't heard nobody go against me or anything. So, and it's been many years. So,
yeah, my family is definitely matriarchal. So I learned to keep a lot of things quiet. These ladies will destroy you. I'm telling you, the more they know, the worse the destruction, chaos, and disorder.
All in love, right?
No, it was hurt. Hurt was intended. Yes.
Oh,
every doctor appointment you go to, yes, the information.
Marcus,
yes,
said they woke up and chose violence.
Oh, every day. And it was 15 of us in my grandma's house at one point. And it was 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And 13 of them were ladies. It was me and my brother and 13 ladies. Yes, indeed. Chaos.
I'd have ran away to the circus.
I tried. I graduated at 17. I was out of there. I was out of there. Mr. Stubblefield.
Like there were 12 of us. I'm like you. I couldn't wait to get out of the house.
Oh, I was running. Mr. Stubblefield, how big is your inner circle?
Pastor Jordan is probably going to laugh because it's probably about 3. And because I categorize my friends very efficiently, I have I feel there are situational associations, there's geographical associations, and then there's friends. I have about 3, maybe 4. You know, I'm a spades player, so I say 3 and a possible.
3 and a possible.
And so what I do is, you know, I categorize, and I try to teach my children that same thing is, you know, you have to categorize your association because everybody's not your friends. And so what I do is, if I'm able to categorize my friends, then that my expectations of you is based on that category you fit in. And so I won't go to a situational association to tell them something that's hard for me because they're only situational. I won't go to a church friend to tell them something private because the only reason we're friends is because we go to the same church. You know what I'm saying? So those friends are very small because they've already been through hard stuff with me, and I've already been through hard stuff with them. So we have a shared experience. So there's no going and telling my business, you know, even though I wouldn't tell yours because you was there anyway. You know what I'm saying? So that's the advantage that I've been blessed to have, you know, is people that have been there at that lowest time. They just knew to call, you know, like Pastor Bartlett said, like you can put something on Facebook. And I remember one time I just put pray for me, and my phone lit up with my friends like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? What's going on? What's going on? I was like, dude, I just said pray for me. Hey, bro, you don't do that. You know what I'm saying? You don't do that. You don't just put pray for me on Facebook. You know, you got to be going through some stuff. And I mean, one of my friends, he's not really, you know, religious at all. He said, man, I don't even know how to pray, but I'm just gonna talk to God, have on my hood wake and talk to him because you must be in need. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's how you pray.
Right. But those are guys you need. You know what I'm saying? Those are people you need that even if you don't see them every day, they just know you well enough to say, hey man, he's, you know, I got to get him, because I've always been the strong friend. You know what I'm saying? So if I show, being the strong friend and the, the atypical male that's just, trying to swallow everything. I'm 49 years old. So I came from that era where if you showed any weakness, then, everybody was coming for you. You know what I'm saying? You was getting robbed every day because everybody thought you was soft. So, I'm from Gary. You had to keep this look on your face. Even if you was the softest dude on the hood, you had to look hard. You know what I'm saying? Just so dudes would leave you alone. And I carried that into, my marriage. I carried that into, even dealing with situations in my life. And it took time for me to be around people that knew better, for me to learn better. I mean, it wasn't automatic at all. A lot of stuff I just learned last week. So, but we have to be open to be ready to learn something.
Let me touch on one thing is what you said about not only having people, but having people that have been through things with you. Mm-hmm. And my band of brothers, the guys I serve with, like Antoine, Turrentine, these guys it's friendship, but it's deeper and it's at a different level. I don't have to call them friend. It's like they know they know how deep it is with us. I mean, and soldiers have that. I don't know if any of you have served, but it's a different level when it comes from that with me. I've noticed with civilian quote unquote friendships, they're more surface. It's more, I don't want to say lip service, that's wrong, but it's not as thorough because people change friends. So I'm gonna know Antoine Turrentine until I pass away. I'll just put it like that. And there's not many things that's gonna turn me away from knowing him. And that's the kind of friendship, I guess you could say, that I have with my soldier friends or buddies. So it's unspoken like that. And we just know that. So having that kind of a circle around you, again, yes, that will help you out in droves. And I wanted to ask the pastors also to end this question. Have you had any sermons or any like Bible studies or what do you call them, revivals that have just focused strictly on mental health? I know this is a new kind of age. So have you had any of those sermons direct, like Sunday morning, and talk directly about not a Bible? I mean, you can use the Bible, but not a parable, so to speak. You get your 3 points and whatever, how y'all do. I don't know. But have you had those mental health sermons to your congregation?
Yeah, I spent a whole month. I was in a series for a whole month of mental health and the Bible. And one thing about Resurrection Community Church, we gonna push you getting the help you need. And like I tell everybody, like I said before, I'm a therapist with a therapist, and will never shy away from that fact. And so, just something real simple, as we all have said on this panel at least once, I believe, not to get too churchy, but Isaiah was on the run. Elijah was on the run from Jezebel, and he's sitting underneath a juniper tree, and he's contemplating, because of his particular predicament, he's contemplating death. He literally prays that God would take his life. In that moment, he's under such strain. He's been the only one fighting at that point in time as a prophet for the Lord. He was a lone wolf at this point, and he was ready to be done. And so we need to. I share that because it doesn't make us weaker because we have thoughts or we didn't have thoughts or whatever, what have you. Everybody's experience is different. But making it less taboo over the pulpit helps people step forward, and maybe not say it in front of everybody because that's not the point, but maybe step forward and make that phone call, or hop on Google and start researching, therapists or counselors or life coaches and everything in between, and we have to sharpen our tools. We have to go a little bit deeper than reading The Purpose-Driven Life. We need to read some other books that help us to be able to speak to these poignant points that are impacting our folks on a daily basis.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Amen. We speak on it all the time. Is it okay if I go?
Yes.
Okay, I thought I heard something else in there. But you know, mental health is this is real. You know, the things that we've gone through in this land, and not just us, but I'm speaking of us as people of color. We've had like a millstone on our head. We've had this pressure on our head all this time, and we are so resilient. We just keep on keeping on. But the struggle is real, and you can't oppress a people. One of the things I say, I'll be like Jordan, say I'm not necessarily a philosopher, but you can't oppress an entire people for hundreds of years and not expect it to have an adverse mental effect. It's just not possible. I had the blessing once of doing an Easter play. Pastors, I don't know if you know Brother Lester Stansbury, passed away a few years ago. And we did a play called the Cantata. And it was an Easter play. And I got to, he tagged me for the voice of Jesus. And one of the lines was, and the Lord was saying, knowing that my hour was near, I went to a garden called Gethsemane to pray. He says that hour was the most agonizing time in those final moments, because I had known for a time what the outcome would be. He was speaking of his death. And so we have a lot of pressures on us in life. We know what they are, and we know what the end results of them could possibly be. Now, all the thoughts and all the things we ponder and contemplate about these things that are pressing on us, we all react to them in different ways. You talked about suicide earlier. But, you know, we all react in different ways. People can get things on their mind. It can take them away from the ones they love, separate them, and, you know, in many different ways, many different mindsets. As the pastor said, it is definitely good to have somebody to talk to. And every pastor does need a pastor, or as Jordan said, every pastor or every therapist needs a therapist. And I meant Orlando, Jordan, when I said that. I know who you are. But, you know, the struggle is real. Mental health, mental anxiety, mental depression, all these things are real. And the more we can have moments like these, the better it would be for the majority of us. I pray that something of this nature will be, you know, available, and some of those guys that are struggling in that way, they would find their ways to this kind of forum and be able to share themselves. And, you know, it's a good relief just to get something off your chest sometimes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bartlett.
So yes, to answer your question, yes, I've done series specific to mental wellness, and actually that was a part of the series, because I think the term mental health is too broad, because health can be good or bad. Your health can be good or bad. So we want to focus on mental wellness. So yes, I've done a series on that. There nationally, we actually have Mental Health Awareness Month, and generally it's during that time. But also, I don't think it's as necessary for our church, and for what I know about resurrection, and from what I know about New Spiritual Life, it's probably not as necessary in those two churches either, in terms of having specific series. And the reason why I say that is because when it's normal for you to address those things regularly, you don't have to put as much focus on, like, we just gonna do a series because this is something that is at the forefront of our minds on a regular basis. So much so that I often use myself in a lot of my illustrations for sermons, but I often use myself in situations in my home. And I remember being very vulnerable with my church one Sunday and telling them that for the last 6 weeks, I've been preaching my heart out to y'all, and y'all texting me, this the best I ever heard you preaching, blah, blah, blah. And my marriage was getting ready to dissolve. So while y'all shouting and hollering and snotting and crying, I don't know if my wife's gonna be here when I get home. Right? So when you talk about, the reason why I bring that up is because when you talk about mental and emotional wellness, these are things that are real, right? And so these conversations and understanding this even from a biblical perspective are talked about, at least I know in the churches represented here on this panel, are talked about regularly, openly, very directly. We're not beating around the bush. We're not like, we're really addressing it head on a regular basis. I've gotten up and gotten ready to preach, and before I say my prayer, I've said, listen, I need y'all's prayers today because I'm really not even feeling it today. So I need y'all to pray me through this one, right? Like, so these are regular things that happen. So even though we do make space for it exclusively, I don't know that it's as important in the churches represented here because it's addressed so regularly and so intentionally on a regular basis. But I know that that's not the case everywhere. I get that. But, you know, this is, these guys, I can speak from experience that is the case.
And I just want to ask, like, I guess if the audience members can respond just real briefly. Have you been to church and heard sermons directed at mental wellness instead of mental health? Have any of you been to church lately, or even when you were younger, and heard a mental wellness sermon? Me myself, no. And like I said, I served on security ministry at different churches. No, directly, like Mr. Bartlett, like you said, directly, not beating around. No, there's always a hidden parable or story that can lead to it if you were really in the Word and you know the Scripture and blah 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 blah. Nothing that was boom directly. Hey, sit down, like you said. Let's talk turkey real quick. We gonna talk about this today. So I want to ask the audience members, just with a yes or no, if they want to respond real quick. Have you heard a sermon address this at the church you attend or attended last?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
At the church I'm at now, yes, because Pastor Jordan is my pastor. But the previous million churches I've been through over my life, no.
No, and Antoine, I'm gonna come to you here in 1 second. I'm surprised that it's so open in these churches that are represented, because, like I said, as old as I am, as number of churches I've attended, it's still kind of taboo, so to speak, to call out mental wellness, especially amongst men, Black men especially. You know, you say, oh, that fool crazy. You know, that's what you'll hear. You say, like you say, somebody, oh, he going to see a shrink, he going to see a therapist. And especially in the military, oh my goodness, these dudes are bananas. I mean, they need more than Jesus, and they will not go into anybody for fear of being looked at as weak. And they rather sit it out alone and shoot themselves in the face than to just talk to somebody in an environment like this and just, hey, let me holler at y'all real quick. What do y'all think about this? Or just, have random questions. So I know you said, yeah.
Can I maybe explain why that might be the case as to why you don't hear that in certain churches?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is in no way to try to make excuses or justify. This is just a thing. One of the reasons why is because, and maybe the main reason why is this: the churches that are represented here on this panel, we've told you what our backgrounds are outside of the church. Mm-hmm. So you got psychology, you got a therapist, you got a life coach. These are things that we deal with on a daily basis anyway. And so I think one of the things that people oftentimes overlook when they're, because let's be real, for the most part, people don't choose churches, they choose pastors, right? So they choose the pastor. The church comes with the pastor. They're choosing the pastor, right? And so if you really pay attention to any pastor, any, if he's worth his weight in feathers, you will be able to see very early on, or if you get to know what his focus is outside of the church, those are majority of the times the undertones you're going to get in the teachings and in the sermons. So if you have a pastor that is entrepreneurial outside of the church, you'll likely get a lot of that type of stuff in the preaching and teaching. If you have a pastor that is criminal justice type of stuff, like if he's into, you know, the activism and things like that, everything will kind of align with that, right? So the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because, just for the sake of those of you who are not pastors, consider that when you choose your pastor. Because a lot of times we're like, man, all you want to talk about is da-da-da-da-da. Well, yeah, because that's where expertise is. So we gotta kind of take a little bit more responsibility on our end when we're making these choices of who we're going to sit under, because most of the time a pastor will give you an idea of what you're going to get most of the time based on a lot of times either what they do outside of church or what their background is, whether it be vocationally or educationally or whatever the case may be. So that could be a large reason why you haven't heard that, because it's likely that pastor was never involved in that type of work. So think about it this way. Would you really want somebody teaching you how to be, or teaching you about mental and emotional awareness, who is not well versed in mental and emotional wellness? We wouldn't even want that. Right? So you gotta be careful with being upset that certain things aren't being addressed in a certain place, especially now in the day and age that we're in, because you can pull up your phone and tap into a resurrection service, and you know what I mean, and get that. If you feel like you're getting everything else you need where you are, you might need to tap in with resurrection every now and then, because you know he's going to bring a different perspective. So I just wanted to kind of just bring that as at least an alternative way to think. Now you do have some, don't get me wrong, that you know, that's a different story, but I just wanted to kind of just put that out there.
Okay, thank you, and we appreciate that too, sir. Thank you for that. Thank you, because I never even considered the church comes with the pastor and not the other way around. So Antoine, mental wellness sermons.
Well, when I think of mental health, I would consider, from an Army perspective or Army chaplain, a Strong Bonds event deals with mental health. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I just done one of those over the weekend and do one of those at least once a quarter. So, I mean, to answer the question, yes, I have heard mental health preached, maybe not necessarily in the church, but from an Army perspective, as an Army chaplain, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that we're kind of, with this generation of soldiers, that's kind of the direction that we're going in, because they're dealing with a lot of mental issues. It's more, it's seen more now than it was previously.
I can definitely concur with that. As senior leaders, most of our trainings went towards mental wellness and awareness for our younger soldiers and how to deal with certain situations. So I found myself preaching, so to speak, to some of the younger soldiers about very same things that I was going through at the same time. Like Mr. Jordan said, I was going through rough patches, but still coming to drill or coming to my trainings and walking soldiers through their own situations, and then have no one to turn to for my own. But so I can definitely relate to that. But it seems that there needs a tide or shift needs to happen to where this is no longer a taboo situation where guys sit down and like Mr. Wallace said, get this off your chest. Stop carrying around all that luggage and baggage and dragging yourself down. Get it out. Say something. Talk to somebody. And then, you know, dust yourself off and move forward. I think we're doing good with this type of space and this type of environment. So I think we should continue to do things like that. But I am glad that conversation is starting to be had so easily now. And it's
hey, Marcus.
Yes, sir.
I know we're short on time, but I really want to share this piece. As a pastor, when my great-grandfather died 2 years ago, I was not able to grieve his death for about 2 months after we had already buried him. Because I had to be, and I just made a post about it today, but I was trying to be everything for everybody and didn't take the time to grieve my best friend, my mentor, my dad, that he wasn't here anymore. And it took me 2 months. And so a lot of pastors, to the point you made earlier, a lot of pastors suffer in silence because they have Bible study, because the funeral happened on a Monday, and I still gotta get ready for Bible study. And then by the time I get done with Bible study, we have a back to school bash in right after that. And then I still got to get prepared for Sunday. And then I have counseling the next day. And so a lot of times when pastors don't feel comfortable talking to other pastors or talking to other people, they suffer in silence. And then that's when you see suicide rates rise. That's why you see, I think the statistic is yearly 1,500 pastors leave their pulpit never to return. I think that's what the number is at this point, on an annual basis. And so it behooves all of us to learn how, and if you don't do nothing but find one person that you can confide in, find that one person and get the stuff off your chest. Don't carry old clothes into new situations.
I got you. So, and to piggyback off Antoine as well, with the same thing with soldiers, it's the same thing. You go on mission on Tuesday morning or early Tuesday morning, somebody passes away at that mission. Wednesday, you ship them home in a box. Thursday morning, you go back on another mission, and you just keep going. And you get to the point where, I know for me, I got numb to it. I didn't cry anymore. It's too much. You just can't show that type of emotion. You got to keep it all bottled up. You got to keep it all. Now that it's bled over to my regular life, I buried my grandmother, didn't cry. Buried her husband, didn't cry. My cousin gets murdered, didn't cry. Another cousin died, didn't cry. And it just carries on, and there's no outlet, so to speak, until you come into a space like this. So yes, we all need it, and we all should have these conversations all the time. So I'm thankful for you guys for that portion. That question is real sensitive to me because of the nature of the subject, but I'm glad to have had you guys on here so I get a better and a different perspective and understanding about it.
Well, just to piggyback on what each of you just said, I'm not going to say any more because enough has truly been said by Bartlett and Jordan and yourself. I did a sermon about that since we talked about doing sermons, and I titled the sermon, "The Noise of Silence." It's very loud.
That's deep. I'm gonna write that
and
down.
Deep.
Okay, I want to bring this to the last question, and I'm gonna try to liven it up. Hopefully, I can bring some more happier energy to the conversation. I wanted to bring up the misconceptions about the allocations of tithes and offerings. Like, I know church business is usually for public record, but I have only been able to watch on the outside as a security member when the offering gets tons up, all these thousands of dollars get taken to the back, and then poof, it's gone. I have no clue of the inner workings of the church. I never wanted to really involve myself. So I want to help others that are in the same kind of boat that I am, coming from the top themselves with the pastors. Can you clear up any misconceptions that I know you've heard about the collection and dispersal of tithes and offering to the church, who gets paid, who don't? what gets built, what's not, taxes, fees, bills, rent, all these things. Can anybody shine some light on that subject? And we're gonna close it with that one. So I need to hear from all of you guys.
Were the lights on when you got to the church?
Yes.
When you flushed the toilet, did the water work?
Yes.
Okay. When you sat in your seat, was there a seat to sit on?
Yes.
All right. Did the air conditioning work at least a little bit, or did they have a fan plugged in, something?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Or they had these.
Listen, with somebody's praying hands on it. Something very simple. I think that a lot of misconceptions, and don't get me wrong, I'm not blind to the fact that churches and pastors and other leaders have mismanaged money. I don't like my best friend. I'm not blind to the fact that the pastors and churches and other leaders have managed money down through the years. But just as as men, just as we would say to a woman, don't treat me based on what some other brother did to you before.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at this in the same light.
But that's the light. That's the light that we see. We see like a minister dollar, like believing on God for a jet. But you got struggling members in your congregation. You need cars on their car. Okay, and you believing for a jet. You gotta. Some people don't understand the complexities, but that is still, even for me, that's hard to understand.
And legally speaking, if your church, whatever church you belong to or thinking about joining or anything in between, if your church is a registered 501c3 organization, legally speaking, their books are public knowledge.
Okay.
So no registered 501c3 or any other variation of 501c organizations can hide their finances from anybody, because it becomes a federal thing and it's public knowledge. But I'll share this and then I'll be quiet because there are smarter people on the panel than me. Ministry costs. And just as I shared with you guys before, I can't call AES or Vectren or whoever your electrical services are provided through and say, you know what, at Resurrection, we clothe the naked and we feed the hungry. Saturday we're looking at giving out over 15,000 backpacks for back to school stuff. Can we send this bill back to you? No, they're gonna cut my lights off at the church just like they would at your house or at my house. And so ministry costs, it's not free. We want to impact and we want to help people on a grand scale. But it does cost dollars and cents.
And Mr. Bartlett, somebody asked about in the chat room, somebody asked about the building fund. Can you shed some light on that subject?
Ignore my best friend. Don't worry about it. I'll tell him about that later. No, go ahead, Jay. I'm just messing with you.
Yes, Mr. Bartlett.
Let me first say this. I think pastors and church leadership that does the right thing with church finances, I think sometimes we do the church a disservice when we don't properly acknowledge the fact that there are some who do not. So I first want to, before I even answer the question, I want to acknowledge that I'm not pretending like there aren't individuals who are, I've heard it said this way, pimping the church.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that. Some aren't pimping, some are raping, some are molesting, some are, and I'm talking about the church money. I'm not talking about the church members.
Right.
So I want to acknowledge the fact that these things and individuals do exist.
Okay.
I also want to acknowledge the fact that many, if not most of the people who have an issue with the way church funds are allocated are not upset because their funds were misappropriated. They're upset because they watched their struggling mama or grandmother continue to tithe and they weren't able to buy them the new J's.
There you go. Here we go.
So there's a third party anger happening in most cases. Because I saw my grandmother struggling, but she was giving the little money she had to the church. And we had to eat beans and weenies because she was spending the McDonald's money on the church. So a lot of the people who have this anger or this perspective about the church fund, they're not even upset because of their money. They're upset because of what they saw from someone else.
Okay.
But even just kind of briefly going back to the whole mental emotional wellness piece, that plays a role, right? Like that matters. So I want to acknowledge that as well. And I don't want to follow that up with a but, because that's true in and of itself. That's just the truth.
Yes.
So instead of saying but, I will say and. The situations that you're describing are statistically less than 3% of churches.
Right.
So worldwide, only 3% of churches are considered mega.
Mm-hmm.
In the Black community, you're looking at maybe 1.5% of churches, maybe, are considered mega. So most churches that we're familiar with don't have enough funds to misappropriate.
Okay. Okay.
Most of the churches that we're familiar with, the pastor works a job too.
Okay.
And in understanding that, I want to just ask some rhetorical questions real quick, just for everybody here, pastors and audience, just some rhetorical questions. Think about how much it costs to run your household.
Mm-hmm.
So rent or mortgage, utilities, toilet paper, all of these types of things. I have the smallest church of the pastors on this panel. I have about 50 members. My building is about 3,000 square feet, a little more than 3,000 square feet. It costs us about $6,000 a month to have service once a week. I have 50 members. And anybody who knows anything about church membership, if your roster says 50, you really got about 30.
35. About 35.
And then statistics say that 20% of the people cover 80% of the church work.
Oh, it's yeah.
So 20% of 30 right now. Well, my situation, my church is 3 years old, and I started it. What does that mean? That means when the money's short, guess who got to cover it?
Yes, sir.
So when we talk about misappropriating funds, I told you I'm able to take my wife to Houston because my job paid for my plane ticket. Because I'm spending vacation money to keep the church doors open. If we're really being transparent.
Yes, sir.
So on a weekly basis, in the 3 years that our church has been open, for probably about, and not consecutive, but probably about 12 out of those 36 months, my wife and I, we don't tithe until the count has taken place, because we got to pay whatever the difference is that we're short to be able to function.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what y'all don't know is that's the case for most churches. I'm not an anomaly. Like, this isn't a one-off. Like, this is a regular thing. You know what I'm saying? And this is not a woe is me. It's really not. I knew what I was signing up for when I signed up for it. So let's not get that misconstrued. And we live decent. You know what I'm saying? Like, we ain't missing no meals or nothing to keep the church lights on or anything like that. Like, we live decent. Both me and my wife have decent jobs and things like that. But I need to understand that, you know, and I even want to say this. Orlando mentioned that as a 501, finances are public record. But what most people mess up, getting the financials, that's only part of a piece of the puzzle. What's also public and has to be given when you ask for it are church bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why that's important is because the financials will tell you where the money is being spent or saved or not spent or whatever. The bylaws tell you how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So when you look at these financials and you look at a profit and loss, you're only getting a part of the story. What you really want to know is, are the expenses aligned with what the bylaws are stating?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So we kind of get mixed up, and we major on minors sometimes. Mm-hmm. Because even if you look at the numbers only tell a part of the story.
Okay. And I want to see if Mr. Wallace can touch on that too, because you said something about it. Like you said, most ministers have a job in the smaller churches. Mr. Wallace, do you take a salary, and are you at a point in your church where your members, so to speak, the ones who either perform or the ones who work, quote unquote, in the church with you, do they take a salary as well? Do you take a salary?
No, we don't take a salary. Hadn't gotten to that point. There's a business aspect to this now. Brother Bartlett and Pastor Jordan, I should say Pastor Bartlett as well. They covered so much. I don't even know. Let me see if I can figure out something else to say here. No, my church is just in its 10th year. Will be 10 years next March. Any business, and there is a business aspect to it, as Jordan mentioned, the tax aspects with the 501c3 and all of that, and all these records that are public records, and we have business meetings every month, every other, bi-monthly or biannually, that people have to come in and see exactly how the money's spent. Those who want to know. Mm-hmm. Ironically, it's the ones who are complaining that don't come to the meeting to see how the money's being spent. So now we're in our 10th year, but I was a bivocational minister for the first 7 years as we started the church. We're a church plant, just like Bartlett's a church plant. And we put everything back into the church because we have to in order for the church to exist. So First Lady and I and my daughter, we were the ones putting the money in. We bought the pews, we bought the chairs. This didn't come from the tithes or the offerings, because we always had to pay the rent or the mortgage. Now, first it was rent, now it's mortgage, and and keep the utilities on, as the brothers mentioned as well. If the air conditioner's not working, people are not coming. If it's cold in the building, people are not coming. If the building's overgrown, the people are not coming. If the church is dirty and filthy, people are not coming. You only need to have one room that's dirty, and that could be the bathroom. People are not coming. Okay. So I'm gonna tell you a story, and it's a brief one, and I'm gonna get it out the way. But the first misconception is when you said you were working security, and then they took all of them thousands of dollars back in that room.
And then poof, it's gone.
Yeah. But like Bartlett said, only 20% to 25% of the church is actually giving.
Right.
Now we have 150 members on the books. We got about 60 or 70 that show up, with only about 20 or 30 of them who are actually giving with routine. Okay, some will give once a month, some will, and don't let vacation time come up. We suffer every summer. Okay, but here's so the misconception is, and somebody, and you said thousands of dollars. Somebody will see somebody drop a nickel in the tray, and think there's a whole bunch of money. You know how the little guys do in the hood, and they got a whole bunch of ones, and they roll them up, and then put the 50s and the 100 on the outside, make it like you got a whole lot of money. That's church. Okay, so and as Bartlett said, 90% to 95% of the churches are not mega. They don't have any money. And so this misconception is an invasive maneuver for those who just would rather not go to church, mainly our brothers who don't want to be told what to do.
Right.
Now here comes my story. I was an associate minister at Greater St. Mark, and I was we were members there for about 16 years. I was an associate minister there for probably 3 years. One of my favorite moments was when there was a senior sister there, senior saint, and she would call me over every time the offering was taken. And she would give me her offering, and I would take it up and put it in the tray. She gave what she had, but that offering to me was the most that anybody could possibly give to make the most difference that anybody could possibly make. She dropped 2 quarters in my hand every Sunday. 2 quarters. And then you got the people who give the dollars. Okay. So there's a whole lot that goes into this. And I think that most of these people who, like we live in a society where everything is a criticism. And if you don't want to do something, you will find something to complain about. When people talk about church hurt and things of that nature, if somebody hurt your feelings at the job, you're still going to work. And you're not going to stop clubbing because somebody hurt your feelings and wouldn't dance with you at the club. You don't run away from home because, some people might. You don't run away from home because things aren't going the way you like at home. You will find an excuse not to do the right thing or not to partake in something that could be right, if that's so be your desire. But one of the things I've noticed in my many years here on this planet, I'll say short years, there is no more desperate a soul than a hopeless human. And we're doing a whole lot of things to each other, but then we criticize all these help agencies. And one more thing, why do we find it so amazing that someone that would take something that was meant for the good and use it for their own gain? Isn't that what mankind has been doing with anything that he can take advantage of?
Yeah, I understand it.
I would even pose this, and again, this is just an alternative perspective. I would even pose this: if I'm going to get up on a Sunday, I'm not even saying every Sunday, but if I'm going to get up on a Sunday and talk about how God is a miracle worker and blessings this and provisions that and blah blah, and I'm poor, would you listen to me?
Me?
So
I would listen to you.
I'm speaking. I'm just speaking. I'm generalizing. Okay. Because and the point that I'm making is this. No pastor knows everything about the Bible. However, there are some basic biblical principles that every pastor should know something about. And if finances or giving or however you want to label it is one of those principles, as a pastor, I can only teach you what I know. Right? And so if I functioned under certain biblical principle, if I function under the principle of reaping and sowing, if I function under the principle that it's better to give than to receive, if I function under certain principles and it's shown to be beneficial in my life, I can speak to those examples. And really what we should be looking at is, I don't want to say in place of, but like an additional lens that we should be looking from is you know, what can this pastor teach me? Because even I gave the stat about the mega churches, but even if you really dig into a lot of the mega church pastors, many of them are bivocational. They're just entrepreneurial. So you take somebody that we all know, like a Bishop T.D. Jakes, and the conferences that he puts on, that's his mental real estate. That's his. So those are under that's T.D. Jakes' ministry. That's not the Potter's House. He owns property. He has film production. He has music production. He's doing all of these outside of pastoring. So, so even for the mega churches,
salary from the church.
Yeah. So even when you look at some of the mega churches, even still, a lot of them are, a lot of those pastors are still, you know, doing things outside of the church to be able to fund the type of lifestyle that they want to live. And so I give my testimony all the time in terms of, like, you know, when I was first understanding and practicing tithing principles, my wife and I, we sat down and did a budget, and we were upside down. Our expenses greatly exceeded our income. And this was, I'm talking within the first year of us functioning with the tithing principles, as we were learning it, putting it into action. And we know for a fact we were upside down, and somehow we were putting money into a savings account. Now that don't add up, right?
That's that God math.
Let me,
but that's my point.
Let me push it to Antoine real quick. I wanted to as hear his point as well. I know I'm gonna let everybody else come back around, but I wanted to hear if he had any misconceptions that you know of that you may want to clear up, Antoine, or you think that you've heard from other people and wanted to talk about as well.
I concur with what I've heard from the other pastors so far.
Okay. Sir, you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you said you concur.
And with everything the other pastors have said, I think they did a job explaining about the finance of the church. I don't have nothing more to say on this current subject or the question that's been at this time.
About allocations of or misconceptions of tithes and offering?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Mr. Stubblefield or Justin Jones, any misconceptions from the audience that you may have heard about how the church works? I know I'm guessing now, Mr. Stubblefield, you're a pastor as well, so I know you'll be more than happy to clear up maybe a point or two that you've heard of.
Well, I mean, I completely agree with what the pastors are saying, but I think the questions arrive when we have unmet expectations when it comes to church. Mm-hmm. So we have this expectation that I'll just give you a story. There was a guy who was not a member of my church. He just knew me personally, that was struggling. And so he came to me as a church. Now, you know, I just started my church in 2020. I have about maybe on a wonderful Sunday, 10 people. You know, we started out with 3 of us and our families. But he needs some help. And everybody knows that, you know, if I can figure out a way to help you, I will. So me and my trustee, we got together through our pockets and helped the guy. Never visited my church, never came to my church. And then he came back again, you know, hey man, I'm struggling, man. If there's anything you could do, help me out. And we helped him again. After that time, I realized, okay, now, you know, whatever I'm trying to do to work on you to help you ain't working. You're just coming because you have an expectation that because you see the word church, that church equates money. And a lot of people don't know that, you know, like Pastor Bartlett said, when you see the church, you see that church. You, your wife, your money, all that is tied to the functionality of the church. There's a difference in a person that's hired to be a pastor and a person that founds their own church. When you're hired to be a pastor, you get a salary, and that church is responsible for its own expenditures. It doesn't come out of your pocket. When you see the church, you're starting, a lot of us start in our homes and, you know, go and end up in buildings and are blessed with opportunities to have buildings. But with those buildings come bills, you know, and when, like he said, you can't tithe, you know, until, you know how much is being spent, you know, but there's still the expectation. I know with New Way, we do a lot of outreach stuff. There's still the expectation that New Way does outreach. There's still the expectation that we're going to have lights. There's still the expectation that the water's still going to be come on. Now that's, these people who are having these high expectations are not the one that's giving. The questions are not the people that are not coming from the people that's giving, and the reason they're giving. And I tell my people at my church, to my little 5-10 members, depending on the Sunday, I say, look, whatever you love, you want to sustain. That's a relationship, that's a business, that's a church, all that, whatever you love. And I tell people, if you love New Way, give. Because if you don't give, New Way ain't gonna sustain. You know, we ain't gonna have the power. If you don't give, I know I'm gonna do whatever I can to continue in my calling and my responsibility to my church. But if you want us to grow, you gotta give, or we gonna stay doing what we doing, you know, until we can do something. Because like Pastor Jordan said, you know, ministry costs money. I have no intention of taking a salary until my church can decide to where the ministry gets too big, or my responsibilities get too big to where I can't work, where I have to focus totally on ministry. But you know, but still, you know, is making sure that you are smart about even addressing some of this stuff. Because I told somebody one time, they was like, well, you know, what you do with the money? I said, well, the only people that need that answer is the two people that's getting it. You know, and people, you know, was like, oh, wait. I said, look, if you ain't giving, don't ask me for no financial report. If that's the reason why you give is for a financial report, then we got a problem starting off in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Because some people give because they want control.
You better get that money for the government,
you know
or get that report for the government come after you.
You know, but I'm just saying, I'm not a 501c3 yet. So I'm just saying, it's like a lot of times you have to be careful about addressing these issues from those perspectives, because a lot of people really just want to have control over you and how you do it. But then the issue is they don't want control when the bills come due. They want you to find that money. They want you to sacrifice and lose your home. That's why you have preachers living in parsonages instead of their own homes, because they couldn't afford their own homes, because all their money went to the church.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask the pastors as well. And we could probably, let me see what time it is. Oh, it's a little late. So I want to make sure I get this in though before you guys, you know, I'll let you guys go. If you had to, a choice, do you think pastors should be paid for what they do? Or is this a job that you should do voluntarily and not be paid at all?
Well, I'll jump right in there. I've worked for 45 years. I retired in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
My wife still works. I retired from working, not retired from ministry. I retired from a 9-to-5. And so I'm living, my income, my contribution to my wife and I's home is my Social Security and my retirement. Like I said, I'm in my 10th year, but I haven't been paid, you know, from the church, and I don't necessarily think I'm going to be here in the short term. But if you want a full-time pastor, what is he or she supposed to do if they don't go to work and you don't tithe? How do they sustain themselves?
Okay.
Now, Jordan and Jordan and the other ministers, you know, you all know about the Levitical priesthood and how the ministers were taken care of by the church in the Old Testament. Okay. So you have to sustain. I just went to visit one of my church members, one of my oldest church members out at St. Vincent. She's in the hospital, unfortunately. And she was so happy to see me, and I'm glad she was. I was happy to see her. But if I had to go to work, I wouldn't have been able to go.
Okay.
That's all I'm gonna say.
And Antoine, I want to hear your opinion too. Do you think being a pastor is something that you should be paid for, or is it a voluntarily thing for the church where you should do because you were called to do so?
I believe if you are a full-time pastor, you should be paid if you're full-time, and the church can afford to pay you. I mean, but if the church can't afford to pay you, then I mean, it might be in the best interest of the church and yourself to go ahead and find you a job. So you're not putting the burden on the church trying to pay you over some of the bills that need to be paid or some of the membership that needs to be.
I'm sorry. What is a part-time pastor?
A part-time pastor?
They don't exist.
What is?
They don't exist.
And I'm not trying to be facetious. I mean, like, seriously, we have to look at this from a real lens. Because we can dialogue all day about who should get paid or who shouldn't get paid, but at the end of the day, if I show up in burlap sacks and cardboard shoes and tell you to trust the Lord, some people will, but there's a vast majority of people that will not. And what sense if I'm your pastor and I got to come to you and borrow money because I don't have grocery money? How does that make sense? And that's for anybody.
Well, it doesn't make sense. But one thing that I'd like to propose to the panel is, has anybody ever been given the opportunity to look at all the grants that's out there for the churches as from a business acumen? Because from what I understand, I've been accounting for almost 12 years for the military. And as I've gone into my own new business here with helping vets, I've come across so many different things that are out there for government programs to give out money. It's ridiculous. And it shouldn't be any pastor that should go without pay. I just think it's a matter of planning and getting the right people, whether that's from your congregation and outside of that are familiar with a bunch of programs that help you maximize not just from taxes, but programs that are definitely that you can build and get all types of money for free and build more business, like money from T.D. Jakes money to whatever.
Mm-hmm. And to your, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because they're out there.
And to your point. Oh, go ahead, cuz.
Well, we've received grants, and we're doing certain things like, we open a food pantry, so we're feeding the community as best we can. We try to help it in many ways as we can. Now, like I said, I worked all my life, and when the Lord, compelled me to start the church, I was already working, so I continued to work. But I knew that putting the money back into the church, the finances back into the church that the church generated, it's not my money, and it was necessary at that time. One of the things I also did, because I run my mouth so much, I kept getting Jesus checks while I was at work. Every time we needed some money, I was dealing with contractors coming in from all over the country. The smallest check I received, and I received many of them, was for $500. We just kept receiving things. And so we got hooked up with different organizations around town, and we received a number of grants, and we replaced the refrigerators and stoves and counters, and we're working with Edna Martin and Gleaners Foods, and we have food pantry open all the time. I have not really focused on the consideration of getting a check. Now, when I said time and vocational ministers working, everything would have to then be done in the off hours that they have, because they have to be obligated to their job. Okay, no job is going to give you time off so you can go run your food pantry. No job is going to give you time off so you can go visit the sick and the shut in and those who happen to be hospitalized or in nursing homes and all of that. I do those things and did those things while I was working, but the time that I could do it was very, very limited because I worked. Now you say, what's a part-time pastor? No such thing. Now I'm retired from my job, so I am doing all of those things anyway because I'm blessed to be able to do so, even though I don't take a salary from the church.
We looked at it from at the aspect of money coming in and what to do to get it to come in. I think I want to see it, and if I'll turn it back to Mr. Bartlett. If you can, like, okay, this is money that's already been collected. It's already went. Like I said, I was at New Beginnings. I know if you all have heard of that, Anthony Jackson was passed. When I say thousands of dollars going back, this is buckets and buckets of money. Like, we got police officers armed to the teeth back there in the back, and they dumping this money, and it's everywhere. And
what, 500, 600, 800 congregants?
Yeah, at a time there were three. It's like over 1,000 people, and there was 3 services. So it's ridiculous.
There you go.
But when and I looked at some of those reports that y'all were talking about, because I sat in on some of these meetings, and they like what got to me sometime was there was salaries mandated for like the choir director, or the pianist, or the guitar player, or the drummer, and the robes for this, or food for that, and the it was a whole bunch of things that were unseen. So, but I wanted and y'all can go back around, but I'll open it to Mr. Bartlett first. Like, do you think that when you get to a certain point in the church where it's too much of a business, should those positions that are volunteer positions, should they be paid? Or do you think that there's a salary expectation, so to speak, like you have to pay the guitarist, you have to pay the piano person, you have to pay things of that nature? I myself have just had to see it, and I know it can cause strife. You know, if I'm not getting paid enough, I'm gonna go over to so-and-so church, they're gonna pay me. But at what point is it for the church now, or is it just for you? So can you address that if you can?
Yeah, so first and foremost, really quickly, let me go back and answer your question about should pastors get paid. Mm-hmm. And I think this was already addressed in terms of it. I think what everybody was saying is it's circumstantial, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's dependent on what your church is able to do, along with, you know, other variables that may fall in line with that. But I'll say this, just being realistic, if you're in church regularly, I'm not even getting into salvation talk, I'm just saying, if you're in church regularly, you at least have some conscious awareness as it pertains to the value of your soul, right? So realistically, as a pastor, you can't pay me. Mm-hmm. Your soul isn't valuable. Like, you can't pay a pastor for pastoring. Like, there's not enough resources in the world to pay one single pastor for pastoring. That's not a thing. But on a more practical side, let me also address my other brother with the grant talk. Number one, we got to be careful when we start talking about grants, because more so than any other organization, when churches are given grant opportunities, specifically federal grants, in a lot of those situations, the federal government will then try to dictate the things you can say and can't say over your pulpit. So if you're receiving federal funding, you have to be careful with giving scrutiny to President Biden for not addressing things that he said he would address during his campaign.
Yeah, but you also have to be familiar with that. It's certain types of grants.
No, I'm getting there. So that's one thing. The other thing is, you have to remember that the bigger the grant in terms of dollars, the bigger the grant in terms of who's providing the grant, churches have to be functioning on a certain level to even qualify or have certain facilities to even qualify for certain grants, which a church like mine oftentimes does not. Then you also, in addition to that, take into consideration that one of the things the pandemic did was it created a new set of loopholes. So let me give you this. I'm talking transparency. I began to take, if you want to call it a salary, I began to take a salary from my church because in order to qualify for money, we had to have a W-2 employee on staff. We chose for that employee to be me. Here's the problem. In order to cover my salary, I had to take money from my personal account, put it in the church account to cover my salary. Here's the problem. I'm a W-2 employee. So I'm taking money out of my personal account to cover my salary. So when I get it back, it's less than what I put in there because they're taxing it again.
You don't get taxed again.
So, so all of these things must be taken into consideration, because let me give you another statistic. 90% of churches, of Black churches, let me say it that way, 90% of Black churches have less than 150 members. So if that is the case, for a lot of these federal funded grants, you don't have the infrastructure to even qualify for them.
So what I was understanding was, I'm sorry if I cut you off. It was once.
Hey, beloveds, Marcus.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to have to say so long to all of you. I appreciated the lesson and the contributions. I got about 4% on my phone, and it's already went dark. It's getting ready to cut off.
Okay. So we got about 9 minutes left. We was gonna cut it at 10 because I know it was getting late for you guys. But I'm sorry.
If I pop out, you know where I went.
Okay. So I was just gonna say, I would assume opening the church got you qualifications for certain things anyway, just because you're a church. So I wasn't understanding that you have to have certain levels, certain memberships, certain this, certain that. Just you found a good grant writer, they wrote the grant, and you get the grant. You know, and then they can help.
No, because you have to have an infrastructure that can prove that you can do what the grant is requiring you to do.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So for example, if you take federal funding and say through my church, I'm getting federal funding for, let's say this is a popular one, crime prevention. Well, if you don't have a certain infrastructure, they're like, how are you even going to do all these ideas you put that you're going to do in this grant? How are you going to do that? You don't have the infrastructure for it.
Okay.
Denied. you get what I'm saying?
Or even beyond that, or even beyond that, there's a whole host. So you're looking at. So if I take Jay's statistics, most of these churches are less than 150 members, right? For a number of governmental grants, you need a SAMS number. In order to get a SAMS number, you have to spend $500 to register to get the SAMS number. And then what I teach a number of pastors is you generally don't want to run it through your church. You want to create a subsidiary organization that is a part of your church, because there is a whole host of grants that they specifically say they do not give to churches. So I have Resurrection Community Church, that's a 501c3, but then we also have our Caring and Sharing Mission, that is that's a separate 501c3 that can receive grants that normally would not be given to churches.
Okay. And that's because most of the things you hear about with a church doesn't have an accept or deny policy. You need help, the church helps you. You need food, you get food. You need your rent paid, you got to fill out some forms so they'll know what, if you ain't lying to them or not. But most of the time, you get help. It may not be all of it, but they help sometimes. And
but that brother Marcus is the point of why, and it's not necessarily me, I get it, but that's the point to why so many pastors get frustrated with the questions about the money, because when you ask for it, more times than not, we're giving it with no question, but it's a lot harder than that for us to receive it. And so there's an entrepreneur that's a part of our congregation, and he serves heavily, and he's like, I want to learn how church and church business works. And so one of the things that he says to me often, he's like, dude, any entrepreneur you listen to, the church model goes against every business principle. You're running basically a business off of somebody feeling like giving, like what? You know what I'm saying? So that's where a lot of those frustration comes in.
All the way back to that first thing we was talking about, the pedestal that pastors are on and their emotional state, because you are seen as helpers, as givers, as caretakers, as shepherds. And this is what you must do. But more often than not, you see the old school with the Cadillac, or you see the mega church guy, because they got the biggest platforms, believing for jets. They don't see the I ain't gonna say smaller guys, but the smaller churches with less members grinding. I mean, to the hilt, grinding all the way down every single day just to keep the lights on. And then you'll see, like, oh, he'll pastor at church. Oh, he must got money, got a Cadillac. No, he's got 2 other jobs that he do that provides that, or a separate stream of income that helps with the car that he drives, not from the church. The church is ran at a deficit from what it seems like. I'm hearing most churches are run at a deficit.
And let me talk about real quick, because my brother said this, and I want to dispel this. I was called to a church. I happen to pastor the church that I grew up in. But when money is short, I have a salary, but when money is short, shortness comes out of my check, or shortness comes out of my pocket. Many times stuff that gets fixed comes out of my pocket if we don't have it. And that's how many of us operate. And that's another level of pissed-offity that's a word tonight. That's another level of pissed-offity that comes when people that don't give complain about or make accusations about how the money is spent. I can barely call the bank and find out how much money is in the account. That's how our bylaws are set up, because I don't want to touch the money. I don't want to be anywhere near the money, because people always got a problem with that. And I'm good with that.
Like Mr. DJ had text in the chat group, he said something about a building fund. I was a member of a little church back in Alabama, had a building fund. We went to that church forever, my whole childhood. They ain't put, I think I said before, they ain't put a new doorknob on the church. 15, 20 years. Like, where's all this building fund going? And it was a small church. So they didn't have a lot of.
I'm gonna tell you where it went. I'm gonna tell you exactly where it went. When you raise the building fund offering, but the tithes are short. In order for us to have a building to fund, we got to transfer the building fund into the general fund so that we can come back to church next week. So when you said a smaller church, likely that's what happened. And then just really, really super quick to answer your question about other salaries, musicians, all of them, whatever. I got 2 things. Number one, let's be realistic. The church is the only place where people are expected to do what they would do outside of the church for a fee and do it in the church for free. That's number one. Number two, if individuals who complained about where the church money was going or not going, if they provided these services in kind, we wouldn't need as much money to function. So you got both of these 2 things happening at the same time.
Right.
You got to work with me. So there's that.
That leaves the pastors or the caretakers of these churches at odds end. And it's, from what I've heard and learned tonight, the struggle itself for them comes from the calling itself. I don't think it's difficult to be a pastor, so to speak, to preach the word once you learn and study it. I think once you, like with anything, you learn, you study, you practice, you become good at it. it's just like tying your shoes. The more often you tie your shoes, the quicker you can tie them and the longer they stay tied. But all of the other things that cause these misconceptions and understandings that are out of the pastor's control cause their emotional state to be where it's at. Like I said, 30% increase since 1999 in suicide. I would have never thought that when I read the stat that these strong-willed men of God can be broken in any kind of way. But you have to remember, pastors are still men just like we are. And at the XY perspective, when we talk about managing emotions, it doesn't matter who you are. You're all born with emotion. You can't, there's no light switch. There's no handbook. There's no playbook to tell you how to control them. Your life experience manages those for you. And if you make a lot of bad decisions, the angrier you'll get, because nothing will go your way. And it's still true for pastors as well. If they make bad decisions for the church, the worst the church will perform, people will judge them. And sometimes the things are out of their control as well. So I thank you guys for the learning experience. I thank you guys for all the talking points and all of the opportunities to share. I hope that people that aren't pastors have learned enough and cleared up misconceptions that they would, again, when they visit their church next time, if you're in the Indianapolis area, please look up some of these churches that were represented here. I believe Mr. Wallace was
New Spiritual Life Christian Church.
So I can say it right. Yes. I want to say I'm right before I mess anybody's up. Jordan Bartlett is Abundant Faith Christian Church. Anthony Wallace Sr. is New Spiritual Life Christian Church. Orlando Jordan Jr. is Resurrection Community Church. And Antoine Turrentine is Believers in Christ Tabernacle Church. Look these guys up, visit them, go sit in and listen to some of their meetings and sermons. And if you haven't learned, you will. Based off what I heard, you'll learn something. And reach out to each other, which I know y'all do. Please stay in touch with me. I hope everybody can drop their email in the chat so I can stay in touch with you guys. And are there any other comments or not concerns or any other statements that anybody would like to make before we pray out?
Hey, real quick, Marcus.
Yes,
I'm gonna shoot some information to you to pass on to the pastors there, because there's a good little amount of ways for them to generate, particularly when you start talking about government funding, government contracting, and everything else that they could do. And because they have on the base all the time churches that come on there that raise money, and they do it very often to see about producing all types of different programs that have started going into the Child Development Center, as well as for the young new beginners into Christ and all that good stuff. They're just learning about the Bible. I mean, they've allowed a lot of opening to start happening because of the mental health issue that's happening. So I'm gonna shoot you some information to pass on to them. If you could, please.
Make sure you put everybody's name in the chat for me real quick, and I will shoot all that information to them. Okay. Gentlemen, who is the most senior guy now? Let me see. I think
age-wise or
pastor wise. I think it's a toss-up. Antoine, how old are you?
32.
32. Uh-oh, Orlando, I think he got you.
I'm sorry.
33. I'll be 30. I'll be 34 next year.
Okay. So that will be unless Mr. Stubblefield is over 34.
Oh yeah, he's 75.
Wow.
That's my brother. I can say
75.
Wow. That's messed up, man.
Woo!
It's real messed up.
Dang.
75. I'm looking pretty good for 75.
Ain't you though?
WW1 vet, but
right. No, just as a shield.
Yes, sir. If you don't mind, sir, since you're the senior guy here, to pray us out. So,
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for this is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. God, we thank you for this opportunity to share amongst men and amongst men of faith and pastors, to be able to share some information. God, we thank you for this learning experience. because God, we realize that communication creates learning. And we thank you for this medium. Thank you for this man of God who decided that this was something he wanted to do, and all of those that are participating. God bless everybody as they go to their separate places. Let them stay in your presence. In your name, Jesus Christ, amen.
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 Gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining the XY Perspective this evening. I think we're going to have another panel next month. It will probably wrap up our Managing of Emotion series. The flyers will be out. The panel will be selected soon. So stay in tune for that. I do want to reach out to all of you and try to get some more frequent talks just about, current events or anything like that. So we can just have more of these and get the membership up just to get the word out so other guys can take part of this. So I appreciate you guys helping anyway. And again, thank you all for attending tonight.
Take care.
You too. Have a good one, gentlemen.